just joined us, if you haven't, if you could drop your name and what you do and where you're from in the chat. We love to see who's joining us today. Also, we have an accessible version of this handout. It is in the chat. If your chat didn't populate because you just joined us, we'll drop it in there again, so you'll have it. Notice that we are running closed captioning along with this, just so we can make our presentation fully accessible to everyone. So we are so excited to share with you about Universal Design for Learning. This is a big initiative now in the state of New Mexico. We are not going away. We are here to stay. We are super excited to share and remind you of stuff that we are already doing in our, what's it called? In the state of New Mexico, and what we're headed towards, and how we can show you what you're doing in your classroom already that has to do with Universal Design for Learning. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump on in. Can everybody, either by a visual thumbs up with the reaction on the bottom or in the chat, can everybody see our slideshow? Okay, I think we're running good on that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what the New Mexico UDL goal is. Our goal is to create expert learners who can assess their own learning needs, monitor their own progress, and regulate and sustain their efforts and persistence during their learning tasks. So it's really important that we provide choice in what we're doing in our teaching. We want to also give all of our students equal opportunities to succeed. We want to build in flexibility so that we can adjust for students' strengths and needs as we're delivering content. We also want to present options for our learners and opportunities for them to apply the executive functions. And then we want to planning for choice in different ways to keep students engaged. So we know now, especially with the fact that we are going through a pandemic still, or on the tail end, I'm hoping, of it, engagement is a big thing now. So with our students going in and out of online and in person, we want to really keep that engagement there. And when we look at everything through the lens of Universal Design for Learning, we will be able to allow for our students to really jump in and get that engagement and help them become expert learners. Lost my little click here. Okay, and so we want our students to really go for their passions and their interests and driving in their learning with that. So our mission is really to move beyond that theory and put into practice statewide relationships that support New Mexico educators in streamlining the initiatives and the practices through implementing a Universal Design for Learning framework that creates expert learners and gives access to all. So Universal Design for Learning is not a curriculum, it's a framework. And we're going to work through and talk about this framework today. It is going to hopefully shed light on stuff that you're already doing in your classrooms, and now how you can enhance it and really give voice and choice without entitlement to your students in your classrooms. So here's just a little bit of food for thought. This is what we hear some teachers say. I don't teach content, I teach students how to learn. And we are going to be creating lifelong learners in the process. So here's a question for you. Are you red, green, or Christmas? If you could put that in the chat to let us know what your choice is.
We have some Christmases going on, some reds.
Ooh.
Both, but not at the same time. Keep them separate.
I like that.
Could have one enchilada red, one enchilada green.
Rosemary, all of it. That is great. I have to agree with Vanessa. I like both, but not necessarily at the same time.
Green usually, sometimes red maybe.
I'm loving it. Awesome. Well, and so does anybody not know who's not from New Mexico? Does anybody not know what Christmas means? Looks like we might have everybody with an understanding in that. Awesome. Oops. So with that, I agree. I think I tend to be with Vanessa. I like depends on what I'm eating. Not sure if I can handle both at once. So a goal for today is to change our perspective and have a better understanding of what the UDL framework is. So we want to change our thinking, and it's not just a checklist. We're not going to just check the box and move on. We want to have this any lesson we plan, anytime we're working with our students, we want to have this UDL lens on so that we're not moving backwards and trying to fix a barrier, but we're pre-planning and making sure that our students have access, all students. So this is not just a special ed thing. This is something for every single student that we teach. So as we work through today and we talk with everything, we're going to be making sure that we remember that we're looking at this through a UDL lens and that it's for all students. So I'm going to hand it over to Candace.
So what is UDL? And if you notice this picture, we're looking through some glasses because UDL is a framework, like Janae said. It's a lens that we look through. It's a mindset. And we'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute, but that's why we have the picture there of what is UDL through glasses.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So there's three principles, and UDL is based off of brain research. It's based off of best practices for teaching that are research-based, and also this framework that we're talking about. It focuses on engagement, representation, and action and expression. And these are color-coded. Engagement will be green, representation will be purple, and action and expression will be blue. And the parts of the brain that each of those connect with, we're going to talk about next. So let me let the slide catch up to me. There's our colors. Okay, so if you notice that green brain, it depicts the engagement area. It's the affective network. The purple area is the representation it connects to the representation for all of us as humans, and it's the recognition network. And then the blue one it connects to the action and expression areas of us and how we connect to things and how we express ourselves and how we show what we've learned. And that is the strategic network. So we will be referring to these throughout our presentation, and you'll see these little brains pop up every once in a while because that is the part of the brain we're focusing on. But it's also important to note that our brains are like fingerprints, and research has found that nobody's connects in the same exact way. And so, of course, these pictures depict them as being separate, but they all interact with each other. And if, through brain scans and all of the research, they're finding that it's as unique as a fingerprint.
Cami, do you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. This would be an example in a PLC meeting that the conversation might flow something like this, where one of the teachers says, I have many students in my classroom today that are confronted with major barriers in learning created by an inflexible one-size-fits-all curriculum designed for this non-existent average learner. And we're going to talk more about that later. And so in response to that, this is where UDL comes into the conversation, that the Universal Design for Learning Guidelines can offer everybody, the teachers, the aides, the administrators, the tutors, the teachers, the parents, this lens for understanding this jagged learning profile, that we don't just have this average learner anymore. And then being able to see that perspective offers different insight into the variabilities and tools and strategies that you need to overcome barriers. And then somebody else might say, yeah, those barriers can occur across any of those principles that Candace just talked about, those three areas, and in any subject area also within school. then when we can successfully implement these UDL guidelines, we can create learners who are resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed, and purposeful and motivated. And we know that because that's what we are. And we as adults are all of those expert learners. And we're constantly learning and growing. And we want our students to be that also. So that then in turn helps them grow in their social and emotional learning. The SEL, the cell happens at the same time, which then also allows for the first two layers of the MLSS to happen naturally also. And so when they can have these discussions and see how all these things tie in, that's so interesting. But then you have that person that goes, yes, but then can I make these changes in my classroom like tomorrow in 20 minutes or less? And will that save me time without adding one more thing to my already overflowing plate? And the answer is yes, that's what we're doing today. That's what we want to show you. And yes, you can absolutely do that. So would you rather choose from one option or from a buffet of options? And we know that in life, we all choose from a buffet of options. We get to choose what we're going to eat when we go out to a restaurant. We get to choose what we're going to wear. We get to choose where we're going to go and are the people that we're going to hang out with. And we have all these options and we have to learn how to manage these options. Candace has a really good example from her ice cream thing.
Sure. So if you go to an ice cream shop, we have a lot of choice, right? So sometimes there can be too much choice and it gets a little overwhelming, but we like the idea of being able to go in and choose what flavor we want. What do we want, a cone, or do we want it in a cup? Do we want sprinkles? Do we want flavorings? Do we want the cherry on top? And so these are just examples of choice that we get in the real world. And in our classrooms, we can bring that idea with us. And then we can allow students to choose how they want to show us what they've learned even, but that's without the entitlement, like Janae said. So we have parameters, we still have control, but we're letting them voice themselves a little bit on how they would like to show what they've learned and how they learn best.
Awesome. So if you look at the Universal Design for Learning guidelines, we will drop a link in the chat, and it's also in our handout to the guidelines. So that way you can take a look at them. This is kind of a simplified version of it. It's there is a lot to the guidelines and to this framework, but the big things we want to think about is the why and the engagement, the what and the representation, and the how and action and expression. And so we're going to dive into those three areas today, but we want you to understand that this is not one more thing. We are not going to be adding one more thing to your plate because many of you are already doing this in your classroom. We're just bringing it to light of what you're already doing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump in here to this video. So let's take a look here.
That's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? Help! I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's nothing else left to do. That's it.
So from that video, what did you guys think of it? What did it make you feel? what was your first reaction from watching that video? Drop in the chat. I'm not sure if we're able to unmute our mics. We were trying to work on fixing that, but tell us your thoughts on watching that video. And I'm sorry, I'm working on making the volume louder.
Unmute is now available for everyone.
Okay. So give us some thoughts, feedback. What did you guys think from that video? What was your reaction?
Just walk.
Just walk.
Learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. Oh, how funny, Candace, we're on sync. Frustrated. Anybody else have any other thoughts from that video? Oh, interesting, Doug. First thought was, why not walk up the escalator? Then I felt as though I was trapped and could not get beyond. Amanda, too. We count on people being able to do things when systems fail, but what if they can't? It's a great point, Amanda. Vanessa, hilarious, right? Feeling stuck without a solution. These are all great. Anybody else have some other thoughts from this video? If you're not sure on how to unmute, on the bottom of your menu bar, there's a little, you should see a little microphone that you can unmute to talk as well. So this is some great insight. Has to, exactly, frustration. Maybe they didn't have this background knowledge. Did they not? Maybe it's their first time on an escalator. So they didn't have the background knowledge to know that even though it stopped, I could still move forward and walk. So how could we relate this to our classroom? Are there many times we give a lesson that maybe our students are just totally stuck because they don't have that background knowledge? Maybe they didn't know the next steps of where to go in that lesson. Maybe they are so used to following the rules that they don't know they can ask questions. Anybody else want to add any thoughts? Go ahead, Candace.
They may be afraid to challenge the parameters too, you know, and get off that escalator.
And in this, I think it's a really fun way and funny way to look at how some of our students may be feeling in that situation for something that we think is very easy and very basic, like why don't they just walk up the steps? But for whatever reason, that student is feeling literally like they're stuck on an elevator or on an escalator. So we want to be able to identify those barriers so that they can get by them. And the reason we chose this video is we want to be able to do what we're saying in our presentation. So as today, as we talk about UDL and the principles of those three colors of the brain that's being tapped into in the engagement part, we wanted to engage you in the video so that you can see how that feels to be engaged, to have that thought process as we're talking about how to do UDL, we are doing UDL with you.
Well, and so for some of those students, all they need is that go ahead, you know, like, okay, well, how are you going to get off the escalator and what way works best for you?
Absolutely. Okay. So now let's look at a little clip for representation.
This is a test of your attention. You have 5 seconds to choose one of these cards and memorize it. Got it? Now, stare at the red poker chip while we read your mind and remove the card you picked. Look carefully. It's gone, right?
So, was your card there? Let us know, either unmute or put in the chat.
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. Nope.
And you can feel free to drop in the chat or say if you know why your card was not there.
Oh,
Yes.
I love it. Very cool. So some of you are right on track. Some of you are not. So those of you who said no, your card was not there. And then the reason why was they were actually all different. So we noticed that is happening in our classrooms too, right? Sometimes there's a perspective that things could be going on, but we could totally change subject, change gear, and lose our kids. So let's watch this next piece and we'll have a little bit more of a discussion from it. So really keep notice of what's going on in the spectrum.
I'm going to show you something that's not completely legal. Amazing.
So I'm going to pause for a second. Cami, I'm going to have you talk about this one.
Okay, there were about 7 things that changed during the course of that video. If you guys saw any of those things, you can go ahead and unmute or drop that in the chat. The structure behind them. Yep. And if you can list specifically the different structures behind them, that would be good. His hat, the money, anybody see anything else? Nope. So this part works on, deals with our executive functioning skills and how our executive functioning skills are life skills. And those are the things that we want to engage. Oh, paintings. Yes. Good job. Posture. Oh, that's really interesting. I've never thought about the posture. Yeah. And with our executive functioning being our life skills, we want to help people so that they distraction isn't a barrier. They can focus on one thing at a time, one goal at a time in their learning. They can be able to problem solve and have that flexible thinking and that working memory and that self-control. And so a lot of times there's tons of things going on around us that our students are noticing or not noticing, or we as teachers are noticing and not noticing. So let's watch it again and see all the things that changed.
But did you happen to notice all the things that have changed since the scene began?
Action. I'm going to show you something that's not completely legal.
Go. Where?
While we held your attention on the money, the table turned to a stool.
Go.
Apollo magically got a new hat and handkerchief. And all the posters and cards in the background changed.
Your brain just played a trick on you. We all think we're paying close attention to the world around us. But strange as it may sound, this is just an illusion.
And Oh, go ahead, Cami.
Oh, I was just going to say, Doug, that was really interesting that you noticed how his posture changed, and his posture changed because he didn't have that high platform and it went to a low stool. But your brain didn't notice that the stool changed from a platform to a stool, but you did notice the posture change. You're the first person I think that we've had say that. Go ahead.
This is the recognition network. The representation is tied to that. And as far as the research has shown, our perceptions and our background knowledge, even as far as the language and symbols and how we connect with them, ties to the representation. So we tried to put in a video that you could identify with, and all of the different ways you guys identified it with it are present. Some people noticed, some people just focused on the money. Some people did notice the backgrounds. And I'm sure if we asked all of you guys, there's reasons why you connected with those different pieces and the posture. And so representation is important in the classroom, and that's why it's included. And we wanted to make sure it stood out.
Awesome. So this next video is a little bit longer. So if you want to stand up and stretch while we're watching it, but we really feel this one's important because this leads into our next area of focus. So we're going to watch a TED Talk real quick from Todd Rose, and really focus in on this because this is one of the better TED Talks. Oops.
Yeah. And you can look for what we've been talking about with the jagged learning profile and the end of average.
Please welcome to the TEDx Sonoma County stage, Todd Rose.
It's 1952, and the Air Force has a problem. They've got good pilots flying better planes, but they're getting worse results, and they don't know why. And for a while, they blamed the pilots. They even blamed the technology. And they eventually got around to blaming the flight instructors. But it turned out that the problem was actually with the cockpit. Let me explain. Imagine you're a fighter pilot. You're operating a machine that in some cases can travel faster than the speed of sound, and where issues between success and failure, sometimes life and death, can be measured in split seconds. If you're a fighter pilot, you know that your performance depends fundamentally on the fit between you and your cockpit. Because after all, what good is the best technology in the world if you can't reach the critical instruments when you need them the most? But this presents a challenge for the Air Force, because obviously pilots are not the same size. So the issue is, how do you design one cockpit that can fit the most individuals? For a long time, it was assumed that you could do this by designing for the average pilot. That almost seems intuitively right. If you design something that fit for the average size person, wouldn't it fit most people? It seems right, but it's actually wrong. And 60 years ago, an Air Force researcher, Gilbert Daniels, proved to the world just how wrong this really is and what it was costing us. Here's how he did it. He studied over 4,000 pilots, and he measured them on 10 dimensions of size. And he asked a very simple question. How many of these pilots are average on all 10 dimensions? The assumption was that most of them would be. Do you know how many really were? 0. Gilbert Daniels proved there was no such thing as an average pilot. Instead, what he found was that every single pilot had what we call a jagged size profile, right? It means means no one's at the same on every dimension. And this makes sense. Just because you're the tallest person doesn't mean you're the heaviest. It doesn't mean you have the broadest shoulders or the longest torso. But this is tricky because if every pilot has a jagged size profile and you design a cockpit on average, you've literally designed it for nobody. So the Air Force realized they had a problem. And their response was bold. They banned the average. Meaning that moving forward, they refused to buy fighter jets where the cockpit was designed for an average-sized pilot. And instead, they demanded that the companies who built these planes design them to the edges of dimensions of size. Meaning that rather than design for, say, the average height, they wanted a cockpit that could accommodate as close to the shortest pilot and the tallest pilot as the technology would allow. Now, the companies that made these planes, as you could imagine, weren't happy, right? They argued and lobbied, and they said it's going to be impossible, or at least impossibly expensive, to build a flexible cockpit. But once they realized that the Air Force wasn't going to budge, suddenly it was possible. And it turned out it wasn't that expensive. And in fact, they made great strides, leveraging simple solutions that we all take for granted in our everyday lives, like adjustable seats. And as a result, the Air Force not only improved the performance of the pilots that they already had, but they dramatically expanded their talent pool. And today, we have the most diverse pool of fighter pilots ever. But here's the thing. Many of our top pilots would have never fit in a cockpit designed on average. So, most of us have never sat in the cockpit of a $150 million fighter jet, right? But we've all sat in the classroom. And I would argue I would argue that these are the cockpits of our economy. And I think we all know that we have some problems. We're spending more money than ever before, but we're getting worse results. Whether we're talking about declining test scores in math and science, or our dropout crisis. You probably know that we have over 1.2 million dropouts every single year in high school in this country. What you may not know is that at least 4% of those dropouts are known to be intellectually gifted. That means we're losing over 50,000 of our brightest minds every single year. So we know we have a problem. But do we know why? So far, we've been content to blame the students. We blame the teachers. We even blame the parents. But here's the thing. I think back to the Air Force example, and I can't help but wonder how much of this problem is just bad design. Here's what I mean. Even though we have one of the most diverse countries in the history of the world, and even though it's the 21st century, we still design our learning environments like textbooks for the average student. No kidding. We call it age appropriate, and we think it's good enough. But of course it's not. I mean, think about it. What does it even mean to design for an average student? Because a student is not one-dimensional, like struggling to gifted. Students vary on many dimensions of learning, just like they vary on dimensions of size. Here are a few obvious ones. And just like size, each student, every single one of them, has a jagged learning profile. Meaning they have strengths, they're average at some things, and they have weaknesses. We all do. Even geniuses have weaknesses. But if the fighter pilot example has taught us anything, it's this. If you design those learning environments on average, odds are you've designed them for nobody. So no wonder we have a problem. We've created learning environments that, because they are designed on average, cannot possibly do what we expected them to do, which is nurture individual potential. But think about what that really costs us. Because every single student has a jagged learning profile, it means that the average hurts everyone, even our best and brightest. Even for them, designing on average destroys talent in at least two ways. First, it makes your talent a liability. We all know kids like this, so unbelievably gifted in one area that their educational environment can't challenge them. We also know what happens. They get bored, and a shockingly high number of them drop out. The second way that the designing on average destroys talent is that it means your weakness will make it hard for us to see, let alone nurture, your talent. We all know kids like this as well. Like the kid who is gifted in science, but who is a below average reader. Because our science textbooks assume that every kid is reading at grade level, this kid's in trouble. Because for her, science class is first and foremost a reading test. And it's doubtful that we will ever see what she's truly capable of. Now, it's one thing when our technology does not allow us to do anything other than average. But it is a whole nother thing when the technology changes and we can do more, but we don't realize it. That's where we are today. In the last few years, education, just like the rest of society, has gone digital. If you don't believe me, just consider this fact. U.S. public schools are one of the largest buyers of iPads in the world, right? So the question isn't, do you want the technology? It's already here. You've already paid for it. The question is, what do you want it to be? And this is where it really gets exciting. We have a chance right now to use this technology to create learning environments that are so flexible that they truly can nurture the potential of every single individual. Now, you might think that sounds expensive, right? Doesn't have to be. In fact, we can get a long way. We can make great strides with simple solutions that we take for granted in our everyday digital lives. Here I'm thinking about basic stuff like language translation, support for reading, vocabulary, even the ability of a machine to pronounce a word for you or read a passage if you want. Basic stuff. But while these are simple solutions, you'll be surprised at how big of an impact they actually have on the lives of individuals. I know I was the first time that I saw it happen. I was observing a fourth grade classroom a few years ago, and they were participating in a study where we were testing the effectiveness of a new digital science curriculum. Now, I'll be the first to say, this new digital version wasn't fancy. In fact, it was pretty basic. The thing that it had going for it, though, was that it did not assume that every student in that classroom was reading at grade level. Now, one of my favorite things about this particular classroom was the teacher, because she hated technology. And I know this because it's the first thing that she told me when I met her. And my response was, okay, why did you sign up for a study that's about technology? She told me she was willing to go through this in the hopes that it might help one kid in her class. His name was Billy. And Billy, as she told me, had a mind for science. But he was one of those kids who was a below average reader. and she was hoping this might reach him now while he's still learning to read. Now, I have to say, that actually made me nervous. Because as I said, this technology was pretty basic, and I didn't want to disappoint her. So you can imagine how pleasantly surprised I was. About halfway through the study, the teacher reaches out to say, hey, guess what? Not only has Billy taken to the technology, but I'm starting to see improvement in his performance. So that was nice. But nothing prepared me for what I saw when I went back to that classroom at the end of the study. Billy had become the de facto smartest kid in the class. No kidding. And everybody knew it. In fact, the first thing that I saw when I walked through the door were 6 or 7 kids huddled around Billy's desk, asking him questions about the assignment. And boy, did he have answers, it turns out. The thing is, all we really gave Billy and his classmates was the learning equivalent of adjustable seats. And in return, we got a glimpse of Billy's talent. And sure, you might say, well, look, that's one kid in one classroom. But then again, that's one kid in one classroom. And isn't that what it's actually about? Nurturing individual potential. Jonas Salk was one individual. He cured polio. What if Billy's the next Jonas Salk? What if the cure for cancer is in his mind? Who knows? But I do know that we came dangerously close to losing his talent before he even left grade school. Not because he didn't understand science, because he was still learning to read. And that's what I mean when I say that simple solutions can have a profound impact on individuals. So the real question to me is, how do we get these adjustable seats for learning in the hands of every student as fast as possible without spending more money? Here, I actually think the Air Force has given us the formula for success. What if we ban the average in education? We know it destroys talent. Instead, what if we demanded that the companies that sell these materials into our classrooms design them not to the average of dimensions of learning, but to the edges? It would be a bold move. It would certainly send a strong signal to the market. The game's changed. But trust me, if we do this, not only will we increase the performance of the kids in our classrooms today, we will dramatically expand our talent pool. Because right now, there are so many students we simply cannot reach because we design on average. Design to the edges, and we will reach them, and we'll get their talent. And I have to say, I know because I was one of those students. So today, I'm a faculty member at Harvard, but I'm also a high school dropout. It gets better. I was a high school dropout with a 0.9 GPA. For those of you that don't know, that's pretty bad. But here's the thing. I've been to the very bottom of our educational system. I've been to the very top. And I'm here to tell you, we are wasting so much talent at every single level. And the thing is, because for every one person like me, there are millions who worked as hard, who had the ability, but who were unable to overcome the drag of an educational environment designed on average. And their talent is forever lost to us. The thing is, we can't really afford to lose them. The good news is, we don't have to anymore. I'm telling you, we have a once-in-a-lifetime chance right now to fundamentally reimagine the very foundation of our institutions of opportunity like education in ways that nurture the potential of every single individual, and therefore expand our talent pool, make us far more competitive in the world. We can do this. We know the formula, and it's time we demand it. Thank you. Hey.
So let's take a minute to digest that video. Very powerful, right? Feel free to unmute or put in the chat. Give us some thoughts on what we just watched.
Karen, that's a good summation. Wow, that's how I feel every time I see it.
Yeah, yeah, it was really touching. And just thinking of giving a student a tool, a way to be successful is just everything that we strive for.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. By giving us a reaction, has anybody seen this one before? Thumbs up or?
Yeah, you could give us a thumbs up if you've already seen it.
But, oh, Amanda, I appreciate the idea of a jagged learning profile. Think about someone having strengths and weaknesses in different areas. Absolutely. I think that this is why we feel this video is so powerful, because really we're looking at the whole student. We're looking at them through this UDL lens. My favorite line, teach to the edges. I love that. Ban the average and let's teach to the edges.
I also think that this is kind of expanding what we look at when we look at being able to adapt things for everyone, because as education, we're always looking for the aberrant behavior on either side instead of actually looking at everyone and their diversity and reaching everyone's strengths and weaknesses and making sure the environment isn't built to sabotage. I think it's such a powerful message that Todd talks about.
And even in my classroom one year, I had a parent that had twins, and they even told me, they had to discipline them differently. And you think twins, okay, they're going to be similar, but it appears everywhere, our individuality.
And Carissa, I think that's awesome that you said that the system is changing to better everyone, because I think previously in education, we've thought that we need to change the learner, not the system, and that there's something wrong with certain students instead of something wrong with the system. And yeah, we need to find a way to help the teachers, Doug, with all of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think even for myself, working as an occupational therapist, dealing with students with different learning abilities and also teachers who teach differently. And I love teachers who say, I'm not familiar with this diagnosis, or I'm not comfortable. What can I learn? And those people who ask, or who, like this teacher who went to this study, those are the teachers that we really want, to empower. And we want to empower all of them, but those ones that go out of their comfort zone, that they don't know how to do or they don't understand, that's great.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that's why we're here doing what we're doing, because we want to help. We want to help strengthen the teachers, and we want them to be able to get through this struggle without losing hope or giving up or feeling like there's too many things on their plates to be able to do. And I don't think that's being negative at all. That's why the four of us have a passion for UDL, because coming out of teaching and feeling and seeing that struggle, we want to help fix that for the teacher as well as the student.
And Doug, here in a little bit, we're going to talk about all the initiatives in New Mexico and what we're doing to try to lessen that you're talking about, that burden of feeling overwhelmed and feeling like so much is coming down on you. And so we'll get to that here in a little bit. So those are good points.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, Karen talked about from the perspective of an OT, and I see that it is so much easier to build an environment that's already accessible for everybody than to go back and try to figure out gadgets and ways and tools to really fill in those gaps and allow accessibility. As an OT, my job is so much easier when people use universal design principles throughout their environment.
Absolutely. And as we continue on, we're going to take a peek into a universal design for learning classroom, how it's set up and accessible. So with that, we're going to jump in here, back onto action and expression. So we just got an understanding of the jagged learning profile from Todd. So we feel that really ties in to our action and expression piece, because if we only ever continue to look at our students on average, we're really missing what they have to offer. And that is why we feel so passionate about the UDL framework, but also about empowering our students to have a voice and to also give them a choice. So as we continue to dive through this, we want to look at the goals that we're asking our students, or the standards that we're asking them to reach. Along with that, really look at the goal and what is the barrier. And the barrier, as we've said, is not the student. So just take that into place or into consideration. And we will kind of continue on and keep going. Cami or Candace, do you want to add any more about, or Megan, about action and expression?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things that is so important to remember is that from the normal bell curve, like what Todd was saying, the weaknesses are the things that come to light, and then we try to work on those weaknesses and make them better, but we don't ever get to see so much the strengths or focus on them, and students and teachers both don't really even know what those students' strengths are. And so this is a way through action and expression for them to express it using their strengths to overcome the challenges that they have with those weaknesses that have popped up. And that's so critical.
I just want to add to that action and expression, back to the brain research, that's the strategic network there, but it's the physical actions of them being able to navigate their learning, and it's allowing them to have those executive functions and knowing, okay, I can facilitate myself, I can be on time, I can plan out this lesson that I need to have done by this due date. And it's being able to communicate and let us as their teachers know what they need to show us that they've learned the material that we've taught them.
Absolutely. So looking here at this next slide, does anybody see some of the barriers or see a barrier? So they're being asked, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. So by either unmuting your mic or putting in the chat, let's start with, what barriers do you see based on this photo?
I'm just going to touch on what a barrier is. We haven't gotten to our vocabulary terms yet, but this is a term you'll be hearing us use a lot in Universal Design for Learning. And a barrier is something that stops us from achieving our goal. So it could be something in the environment, it could be physical, it could be mental, it could be a social element, curricula, cultural, any of those barriers.
Thanks, Candace. So looking at this, we have Carissa says a fish in the bowl. What other barriers do we see?
Very few opposable thumbs. Not able to climb. Oh yeah, Karen, seal. Water animal, yep, that'd be very difficult.
Anyone else see any other barriers? Right, not every animal has hands, so they can't grasp. Oh, arm strength to weight ratio, absolutely. That's a big one.
And even just defining that word climb, because technically the bird can get up in the tree, but is that the goal? Is the goal climbing the tree, or is it getting up in the tree? Or is it being able to explore the tree or access up in the tree somehow. Like it's just so not defined, because even though the bird doesn't have the hands, it can kind of fly and hop up the tree.
And part
Yes, Karen.
Part of UDL is identifying these barriers before the lesson. So it's identifying what could be a barrier for students and how can we make it accessible for everybody. Does anybody have any ideas on how we could maybe make this goal accessible without the barriers that we see here in this picture?
So what could we change so that they can reach the goal? Teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the monkey can carry the fish.
I love that.
And also part of universal design for learning is making sure your goal is clear. So like Cami said, you know, do we want them to climb the tree and stay on the top? Do we want them to just climb up to the base of the tree where the limbs start coming out? What is our goal? We need to be very direct and clear on that. So then our students know how they can plan for that.
Yeah, Doug said that perfectly. He said, define being in the tree differently. The elephant's trunk can be in the tree. Does he actually have to climb?
Yeah. And I had not thought of this before, but you could use his trunk as a ramp for some of them to just walk right up in there.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Or
I like
to lift him up in there.
Yeah, I love it. And the monkey can report from the tree what she sees. Absolutely. So it hasn't been defined. I also think the elephant could take down the tree, and then the fish and seal could be possibly in the water behind it, so that the tree is laying flat and it's in the water, so everybody can still access the tree. I love it. The elephant can be a ladder.
Yes.
So these are all great solutions, and you are now starting to take a look at a goal and a lesson through a UDL lens. So we're going to continue on. Just kidding, my thing didn't refresh. We're going to come back to the break, and we're going to come back to this because I have to refresh it. So we're going to jump into this one. So Candace, let's go ahead and let's review some terms.
Yeah, so here's 2 vocabulary words that the barriers one we just covered, which we'll cover again in a minute. But variability is just our individuality. And these are terms that we figured we could spend some time on because they're very important to universal design for learning. So as we plan lessons, as we talk about it, as we try to as you can see, we try to plan in the forefront. So then we're not trying to, like Megan said earlier, you know, you're not trying later to patch those areas that students are having trouble with. You're trying to plan for them beforehand. And so planning for their variability and their individuality, as we saw with Todd Rose's video, everybody is so unique, and average and normal should not even be words that we use in our schools. If we just realize that we all have special qualities and we all have strengths and some weakened areas, then we can plan for all of our students in that way. And so variability is just that individuality. And the picture there shows several different brains and maybe the connections that they have. We talked about this earlier, and how every brain is like as unique as a fingerprint. And the way we make those connections are all different. And that's what makes us very individual, very much individuals, and that variability that we're talking about. Then down below we have barriers, and those are all of those elements that get in the way of achieving those goals. So as we saw in our last little cartoon picture, there were many barriers for many different animals, and all of them were different. And so as we go into our lesson plans and our classrooms, we can think about these barriers and our students, because we know them well, and we know what barriers might be a challenge for them and how we can maybe help them with that. But the end goal, we really want the students to be able to identify those as well. We want them to know more about themselves and allow them to identify the barriers as well, and voice themselves how we can help them with those barriers. So we have a little cartoon picture here. And I'm just going to sum it up for you guys, but the man is taking the snow off the steps, and the student in the wheelchair saying, well, can you clear the ramp? And he's like, just a minute, I'm clearing the stairs. And then the kid in the wheelchair is like, but if you clear the ramp, we can all get in.
Love it. Love it.
Oh, Janae, did you want to talk about the #1 users of ramp?
Yes, I do. So we have ramps out there, and we want to know who do you think the #1 users of ramps are? Put it in the chat, or you can unmute. Who do we think the #1 users of ramps are? Everyone?
Oh, somebody is really good.
Yeah. Very cool, Gen Ed kiddos. I love it. Any other thoughts? So Rosemary is right on. It is mom with strollers, followed up by skateboarders, and then by our delivery folks. So like the UPS and Amazon folks who use their dollies with ramps. So the concept of universal design for learning was originally an architectural design, so that we could make buildings ADA compliant. And then what happened was the field of education took that framework and brought it into education. So that's where universal design for learning started, is so that when talking about ramps were originally made so that folks with wheelchairs or a disability who could not necessarily maybe access the curb, they made it accessible, just like the button you push to open a door for like wheelchair access, those make buildings ADA compliant. And so we always like to talk about ramps, because even though ramps were made to many times help those in a wheelchair access, everybody benefits from it. And so that is the same mindset for universal design for learning framework in a school and in education. It is something for all. So we really want to change that mindset that universal design for learning is not just for special ed students. It is not somebody with not just for somebody with a disability, but it is for all. We should be really changing that term in our classrooms and in our schools, that these are all of our students. We want to make sure all of our students are successful. So that is just a great way of framing it and putting it out there, that really, truly everybody benefits from universal design for learning. Absolutely. Some people have disabilities that aren't visible. And many times those are the disabilities that are the hardest to not to see per se, but also to help support. And people don't always realize what's going on there.
Janae, can I jump in really fast? I was watching some videos on research coming out of COVID, and we're going to have a lot more invisible disabilities in the workplace and the educational environment post-COVID, because we have so many symptoms that are, psych-based or cognitive slowing. And so we're all going to really have to focus on this, because many, many people have been hit by these long-term symptoms.
Absolutely. Thanks, Megan. So here's just some food for thought here. I'm not going to read them to you. I'm going to let you guys have a moment to grab this text. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into our terms. And so Candace is going to take a deeper dive into some more of our terms here.
So we have 4 terms that we really like to focus on. We talked about variability and barriers. We just like to talk about the concept of a framework, which we've gone over several times, but we just like to make sure that everybody understands what a framework is. So a framework is not a curriculum. It's not something you have to purchase. It's something that we just kind of wrap our heads around, And it's a mindset, it's a lens you can look through, it's a different way of thinking. It is research-based, and it's also those effective strategies that are research-based as well, but also paired with neuroscience, which is the research of the brain. And so it's best practices, and they're proven practices. And it's just being able to plan ahead of time, like we were talking about, and being able to plan for that engagement, representation, and action and expression of our students. So is that, I'm just curious, can you guys give me your thoughts on framework? Is that pretty clear now? Good, yes. Okay, so the jagged learning profile, Todd Rose mentioned, good, yes. Mentioned in his video. And the jagged learning profile is something we really take a good look at when we plan for our students. And we also make them aware of their strengths and their weaknesses. And if you think about it as adults, we do this as well. We know our strengths, and we're uncomfortable when we have to go into our weaknesses, right? And that's why we choose to learn. Even like right now, you guys are probably doing the strategy that works best for you, whether it's just listening, whether it's taking notes, whether it's drawing, doodling, whatever it is. Some people like to type their notes now. The digital components are important to them. And we found that as a team too, we all have some strengths, and combined, like Doug said earlier, you know, our faculty and our teachers are strong, and together they're super powerful. So it's just building their strengths and their toolboxes so that they can be the best teachers that they can be. And so the jagged learning profile here kind of goes in depth with those executive functions, things that we might not think about when we look at student strengths. We might stay kind of in the academic realm of things, but we can expand that a little bit, and we can think about what engages them, where's their mindset at? How are they at planning things? How are they at organization, which does stand out in the classroom sometimes because we may have that student that's always having to clean their desks. Their morals, their culture, their ethics, how do they self-monitor? Are they able to set those goals? Their curiosity, their background knowledge. So when we think about a jagged learning profile, we're thinking about a lot more than just what we see in their academic realm of things in the classroom. Does anybody want to add to that?
I think it's good. Kemi, do you want to break down our UDL terms?
Yes, having technical difficulties.
That's okay.
It doesn't always want to unmute. So in understanding the UDL terms, we're going back to that affective network, the green part of the brain with the Y and the engagement. And the Y of learning, this is the part of our brain that's going to monitor the internal and external environments and set these priorities to motivate and engage in the learning and the behavior. So a good way to think of this is to think about, what is your favorite memory of a time when you were motivated to learn? So what is your favorite memory of a time you were motivated to learn? And why? And I think Candace or Janae, if you had a good one the other day, if you want to give them an example to start off with.
Candace, do you want to, or you want me to?
I can, yeah. So for me, outside of the classroom and outside of school, raising fair animals was one thing that I really loved. And one of my favorite memories is just learning, you know, how to take care of the pigs that I raised and how to show them. And the reason that I loved it so much is because I loved animals, you know, and I loved taking care of them, and I loved just nurturing them. And so one of my favorite memories of being able to learn was, you know, the kind of food that they ate, and how you have to put the straw, and why they sweat. Pigs don't sweat, and so that's why they roll in the mud, and that's why they are perceived as stinky animals. And
it's a great one. My motivation was that I wanted to learn photography when I became a mom. I just felt I needed to capture every moment of my kiddo. And so I went and started really learning how to take photos and be a part of that because, and it also brought me to a connection with my mom as well, because she takes pictures. And so the two of us could kind of compare, and why did you take this angle? So that motivated me to really become a better photographer. Anyone else want to share something that motivated you and why?
Marcia said, I struggle with writing. So my teacher taught us a step-by-step way of organizing and putting thoughts on paper. This made me have some success, and I loved getting to write anytime I could after that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
So you were motivated to learn because the teacher helped you individually and taught you, or helped you as a group maybe, but taught you that step-by-step way of organizing and broke it down for you. And that's why you were motivated to learn?
Absolutely. I struggled with writing. I hated writing. I wasn't successful. I was given bad grades when I wrote. And then once somebody took the time to make it accessible to me, then I was able to have success and have written professionally. So it carried over into my professional career as well.
Did it take away some of the fear with it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So the fear of not being able to do it or do it right was the barrier?
Somewhat, yes.
Love it.
Awesome. So the next one, the purple brain that we've seen with the recognition network. This is the representation of how we process and learn new information. That's the what of learning. The best way we can help you understand this is through the question, what is an effective way for you to learn new things? So for me, I have to read it. My kids get so frustrated with me when we watch a movie together because I'm like, put on closed captions so I can understand it, because it helps me just process it better. And they're like, do we have to watch it with the captions? So I need to read things to really understand it in my brain, but then I also have to do them hands-on at the same thing. I can't just read it without doing it. And I can't just do it without reading it. And that's something that took me many years to learn. And I didn't just do it in school. I do it my whole life in everything.
Love it.
And if you want to share at any time, stick it in the chat or raise your hand on your little icons, or just unmute if you have an effective way for you to learn new things. And Caroline said, I had to teach sped resource chemistry and we had to learn moles and Avogadro's formula. And I knew my kids were never going to understand. So we created felt moles and put the formula on them. Oh, that's so creative. Yes, that is an effective way to learn something new. Definitely. Because you're putting the words with the kinesthetic and the hands-on and a picture with it. That's awesome.
My principal actually loved that idea, and he suggested it to the rest of the department. Why sped kids need Avogadro's formula, I don't know. But they had to know, at least they learned the formula. They couldn't figure out how to do the equation, but they understood they understood what the formula looked like.
Right. And that's a good question. That goes back to our picture of everybody climb the tree. Do they really need to learn this? Because like what Todd was saying with the technology today, I can press my button on my phone and say, Siri, what is Avogadro's formula? And it will pop up, right? The benefit for learning how to use formulas is simply those executive functioning skills that are life skills of problem solving.
Yes.
So knowing how to use a formula is problem solving, but you're right. Like, is that the most important part, or what is the single most important part of that goal? Right.
Right.
So that's really important. And then the third part, the blue area of the brain, the strategic network, is the how of learning. And that's the part of the brain that's going to pull in all those executive functioning skills and plan and organize and initiate that purposeful action in the environment, and then express how you know you've learned something. And so the question for this is, how do you show what you've learned? So for me, it's when I can teach somebody else. That's a big thing for me. What about for you guys?
You know, for me, it's when I do something with my hands. You know, when I had to learn all the bones of the body and the protuberances and everything in school for anatomy, I made the bones out of clay, and that helped me learn everything. So I've learned I am very kinesthetic.
Awesome. Anyone else?
This is why we wanted you guys to see these great questioning, the why, the what, and the how. If you remember those, it'll help in planning your lessons as well, so that we hit those 3 areas of the brain.
And Carissa said she learned LAST as an acronym. And so L is listen, A is apologize, S is solve the problem, and T is thank them for any mishaps and for them to communicate that to you to fix the problem. That's awesome. I actually saw that up in our local coffee place here where I live up north in Aztec called Durango Joe's. And they had that acronym up there. And they had added a couple more in so that it was lattes. So it was like a coffee thing, but they had that same thing. That's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we realize, especially because I teach nothing but special education, that most all of my kids are kinesthetic, and they cannot, most of my children they're not level 4s, but they have cognitive dysfunction, and they have reading comprehension problems and math problem solving. And once they put their hands on it, at least that's how I am as well. When they put their hands on it, they start understanding, you know, the repetitive. That's why I love UDL, and I've taken many UDL courses, because you can tailor it so much to specific students as to, and group them in collaboration, as well as what is kinesthetic, which ones can read a little bit better, which ones can understand this concept a little bit better. And I think that's why I love UDL so much. Our school has not adopted UDL, but I'm working on my doctorate, and I've had to make many lesson plans, and my colleagues love it, because they're like, oh man, I can just go to this kiddo, even in the gen ed classes, and work with them.
Right. Yes. And the thing that is awesome about UDL, and even taking it like that step further, is that you provide all of those options. If you provided all 4 of those options, then all of your kids can function. And it's not even just so much this one option for this student, this one option for this student. It's that we put all those options out there, and they can choose what option, and we can help them figure out which option is best. And the thing that I like best about that picture that we just had up there, I don't know, on my screen it disappeared, but with oh, there it is, with the brains, we're trying to show where the blue is and where the purple is and where the green is with the strategic, effective, and recognition networks. But notice how they all overlap. You cannot reach one without touching the others also. And like what you were saying, offering all those options is so critical, because that's how their brain is going to learn. And then, like Candace was saying, each brain is so unique, like a fingerprint. We can't possibly just figure out everything for everybody. But if we provide those options with that voice and the choice for the student to choose what works best for them, then we're going to learn at the same time as the teacher, as they're learning in that.
And Carolyn, I just want to throw in a teaser because we're about to take a break after the next slide. But we're going to talk right after the break about practical ways that our team can help support your school in starting to take steps towards UDL. We are available for trainings and things like that, but also really practical tools, which we're going to show right after break that will be free for your school if you apply. So we're really hoping that we can spread the word just like you are, and make sure that schools are getting the message that this is the approach that allows people to be successful.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you.
And so in the engagement part, we're just looking at how do we provide options for recruiting interest, meaning that we give a variety of choice to the students to choose what their level of interest is, while sustaining the effort and the persistence and the self-regulation. Because keep in mind, as we do this, the social emotional learning is going to happen naturally in this, so that we can reach the goal of engagement, which is to create expert learners who are purposeful in their actions and motivated by learning in and of itself. And then with the representation part, we want to provide the voice and the choice for them to choose from options of how they're going to perceive this new information that they're learning, and anticipate for any language or symbols or comprehension, and eliminate those barriers for that, so that we can create expert learners who are resourceful and make background knowledge of how it fits into something within their scope already, that they can go, oh, this is like this, and relating it like you did to the mole, that like an actual mole, and putting it on that. And then the last one is the action and expression. And again, we want to provide the choices, the options for them, to students to make a choice, giving them a voice and a choice for that physical navigation of learning and expression and communicating their needs and understanding, which then links into all those executive functions that then again brings in the social emotional learning naturally within this, because they have to be they have to be able to do the self-control and the planning and initiating the tasks and thinking of all of this, creating their goals and achieving them, so that we can create an expert learner who is strategic and goal directed. And that's what we have below each of the brains there that you can see in each of the pictures. And we cannot move into this area where the students become expert learners if we do not give them the choice and the voice included in that.
Perfect.
Well, I see Karen's hand up.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I just have a question, because now I'm kind of thinking I may have seen this without knowing that this was universal design. So there was a teacher who taught New Mexico history and gave the lesson, said, hey, you know, here's all this information. And I was helping support a special needs student. And the teacher said, hey, I don't care how you explain it or how you show your learning. You can rap about it. You can draw a painting about it. You can write a paper, put a play on, whatever. But I want to make sure you know the main points. And I want to be able to ask you questions and for you to be able to tell me the answer in your own way. And all of these kids were like, so, I mean, this painting, and he was able to say, you know, this is where they had the battle and this is what happened. And it's almost like he knew way more than probably the person who just took the test, right? And memorized the answer. Was this what I was witnessing like 5 years ago?
Yay! That's exactly what we're going for. You know, options and being able to learn, options in being able to show what you've learned, and options for engagement. That was the perfect example in a classroom of them being able to express themselves in many different ways. And wouldn't it be wonderful if it wasn't just that student who has an IEP who gets those accommodations, but it's just built into the lesson that anyone who is in that class is able to express their knowledge in that depth that you were just talking about.
Yeah, and it's just, now I have to go back and tell this teacher, because, you know, I remember there was a kid who was in a gang, very, just disengaged in every class that I would see him in. And he came alive with this art and like representing things and talking about how he kind of made it into like this side of the war versus this side. And this is kind of like how it is in my neighborhood. And it was like such a like, wow, like even social type of things. So thank you.
Yes.
Absolutely. That was great.
And that is such a great example. I was in a classroom the other day with a history teacher, and they were going over the times of prohibition. And one of the other teachers had asked the student to write down the answers to the questions about prohibition. So he was asking the teacher, can you go over my writing, because I don't write well and I don't know if I was able to communicate what he wanted. And so he was able to say verbally everything about the prohibition. I learned things just sitting there listening to him, way more than what those questions asked. And so then the teacher was trying to help him redo his writing for this other teacher. And I was thinking, how wonderful would that be if they could just let the student do what his strengths are, and he could just press record on his phone or whatever, even just right then as they were talking, and take it over to the teacher, because he answered those questions and more. But for some reason, there was a disconnect with the teachers thinking that in order to meet the standards, it had to be in writing. And that's not true. And so I actually went back through all the standards with this history teacher and said, see how it says verbs like describe, explore, discuss, and nowhere does it say you have to write it. And so he didn't actually end up having to write it, and he could just speak it all. And that was his formative assessment, and got the grade for that. So yeah.
Yay. So keep your minds going, keep thinking about all the stuff we're doing. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. And then we're going to come back and continue on. So I will set the timer.
Before you do, Janae, I just wanted to point out something that Janae did that was so UDL, that was awesome. And I don't know if you guys caught it, which I'm so thankful you left your camera on. She needed to stand up. So she stood up, she moved her screen, she moved back and forth to get that blood flowing, right? There's no rules. Nothing says you have to just sit down during this. During the presentation and stuff, and the things that you're learning, that we want to be able to UDL all of it. So thanks, Janae, for exemplifying that.
You're very welcome. So with that, stand up, stretch, go get some fresh air. I'm going to start our timer. We're going to come back in 10 minutes.
Views of snow-covered peaks.
Hi, my name is Shelley Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregates students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be, philosophically, versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we could have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay, because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end, and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split, and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to, the kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with Universal Design for Learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
So with watching that, give us some thoughts from what we've talked about already this morning to what we just saw.
Doug said angles are everything in sports too.
There's a reason it's a curveball, right?
How does that fit into our jagged learning profile? It's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting that you said angles are everything in sports too. Just thinking about that, I used to be a math teacher and I was working with a student trying to help him understand what an angle is. And he was an 8th grader, and it dawned on me that a teacher never explained the angle is this, like, and the angle gets wider and smaller, because as I asked him to point around the room to me, what are angles? He kept pointing out right angles. Everything was a right angle. And if it wasn't a right angle, he couldn't see how it changed. And so we actually used basketball for him to shoot the ball off the wall into this hoop, because we had this little tiny basketball hoop shooting thing at the place where I was tutoring him, and showed him how if he hit it higher up and made a steeper angle, it would miss short. And if he made a wider angle and hit lower down, it would go too far. And his brain, we were trying to use things that he was familiar with for his brain to grasp angle, because he kept saying the angle is where you draw that little arc thing on the paper. And so the actual line of the arc was what he thought was an angle. He couldn't get this as being an angle. And so, yeah, that how you represent those things in people's brains is everything.
Love it.
Good point.
So-
Paul said that this is why teachers leave the profession. A 7-10 split is very difficult and requires a lot of patience and practice. And still one rarely makes a 7-10 shot. Sorry to be negative. So in UDL, Paul, the idea is to not leave a 7-10 split. It does happen sometimes, but we plan ahead and we try to get that curveball drilled perfectly so that it hits the pocket just right. And then we don't leave the 7-10 split. We got a lot of good conversations going on.
Yeah, good conversation in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is if we give everyone a choice on how to express themselves and how to engage, and we give them choices early, because it's difficult for older students to have trust in choice because we don't give a lot of choice out there right now. But to allow them to be, the bowlers and be in control of that ball. We don't have to hold that ball so tight and it be our job to hit them all. Our kids have a part in this too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I think the comment that Doug said, challenging the lower end, I think that's really important as well, because the high-end kids or the gen ed kids, you can give them a book, they'll figure it out on their own. It's the low-end kids that even in general education, everybody's wanting to teach the stellar student, but they're not the ones that need to be taught. And that's what a lot of frustration, I think, in teaching is that they want that AP kid, and 90% of them are not that way.
Well, I think, yes, that's such a good point. And the higher ones, when challenged, could teach the lower ones in growth. But what we're learning, like what Todd's video said, is that when you can even the playing field with different tools and technology and choices, you don't have as many low-end students as you think you might have. They're actually not low-end students. They actually have just been confined into this little peg hole, and they just needed to get out of it to show everything that they really know. And that's what we're finding as we give the students voice and choice. They're not actually that low end. And like how he said, he went back in, and not only was Billy excelling, but he was teaching others also. And he would have been like considered one of those low end students, but it turns out he wasn't when he had that voice and choice to use the tools that he needed to express himself. And we actually have an interview from a student that is one of those AP students. She's the junior class president at a large high school, well, large for our area. It's about 1,000 people. And she was an all A student, and she got into this one math class, and the teacher only taught by standing up and giving a lecture for the entire hour and then giving them their math assignment as they went home. She looked on so many different websites, tried to teach herself the math, and was getting a C in the class and was so upset and stressed. She went to talk to the teacher and ask her different ways that she could utilize her strengths in math to show what she's knowing or to learn what she's knowing. But the teacher wouldn't allow her to have that voice and that choice. And so that student really needed to be taught, even though she was an AP student and junior class president and all A student, in a different way, because the one way she was being taught was not how she learned. And so it's for everybody, because even with all the different things that she tried to do, because it was an AP trig class, it wasn't enough to try to find recordings online with bits and pieces, because her teacher was also requiring her to do it only the way that the teacher had shown, and that part did not register in her brain. And so I think it's everybody. It needs to be that way for everybody, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that myself. So great point. Thank you.
And Deb, we are trying to reach out to more and more New Mexico teachers, and we're offering, we'll talk about these in a minute, but we have cafes monthly that we invite them to teach them about universal design for learning. And then we also have some really cool tools and resources that we're offering free to schools, which we'll talk about soon also.
But do know we are a brand new initiative. Like New Mexico UDL is brand new as of August this year. We're not going away. We're not going to be a drive-by initiative in the state of New Mexico. So our hope is to really be here for the long haul and make that difference, and really not add one more thing to teachers' plates, but empower them to see what they're already doing in their classroom. Just like the example we heard earlier, that I think it was Karen who shared, like, is this what I'm seeing in the classroom? Yes, absolutely. And just reassuring teachers and students that this is happening already, and just kind of bringing it to light, and having it has more in the forefront, and really looking at everything we're doing in education through that UDL lens. And Doug, so with that,
and Doug, you're right. I don't think UDL is being taught to see a teacher's classroom through that lens or framework. It's because it's brand new, like Janae said, and that's what we're in that position to teach them how to bowl. I loved that you said that. because you're right, otherwise that probability of a 7-10 split will not decrease. And that's what we're doing through the cafes, through these workshops and stuff. And that's our hope moving forward, is that we can be able to do that in every single school with every single teacher also. But that's what we're moving towards right now.
So I have a question. I am not a New Mexican. I moved here from Texas, so it's a lot different. And something that I have noticed, I don't want to be a naysayer and I don't want to be negative, but there is something that I've definitely noticed, and I've worked in 2 different school districts. One is a director of special ed, and now I'm the case manager and IEP writer for the district in Clovis. And the consensus and the common thread is we've always done it this way. And that's just kind of everything I've heard from Albuquerque on to the conferences on down. And that's a really dangerous statement because, I mean, we need to change. I mean, right now, Indiana actually wants teachers to prepare their whole year of lesson plans for a year and present them to the administrators in June 30th for the next following year. So it's just very disconcerting to me as a teacher that, you know, we've always done it this way and this is the way it's going to be and nothing changes. So how is that going to be addressed? Because I do know several, especially these little rural schools, that will fight tooth and nail about that.
Well, it's so funny, Carolyn, that you said that, because Indiana is also one of the biggest leaders in universal design for learning in the country right now.
So yes.
yeah. So, you know, they definitely are ahead of the curve. I mean, the concepts of UDL and the research have been around for a long time, but people are finally understanding that making this difference in perspective and approach is making a difference in their kids' scores as well, which unfortunately should not be our goal. It should be learning and enriching, but, you know, that's the way, unfortunately, our society measures progress. And so that the fact that there are school systems that are seeing dramatic differences by starting this approach is pretty great. I love that you brought up Indiana.
But also know that we, our little team here of 4, we are being asked to present. So for example, tomorrow, we're sharing everything we're doing with the special ed directors, every special ed director in the state of New Mexico. We have access to all the superintendents. So we're not only working top down, but we're working bottom up. So we are inviting all educators in the state of New Mexico to join us to learn about it. We have a website up. We are on social media. So we're really trying to hit everybody in the state of New Mexico where they're at. So just like this training will be posted so people can, if they weren't able to attend, they can go access it. They can email us for support. So we are really working to change the narrative and to change that this is the way it's always been in New Mexico. That is why we were given the funding we were given, and that's why we became New Mexico UDL. So I know, and part of what we do, we are part of, since we're part of the Central Regional Educational Cooperative, there are 10 regions in New Mexico that deal with a lot of but work with a lot of the rural school districts. And so our hope is to touch every single school district in the state of New Mexico. And so we are working to be that change and to change that narrative. So I hope that helps. We're moving on to some super exciting stuff. We hope you have enjoyed our videos so far. We hope you have taken a deeper dive into UDL. Megan, did you want to share your screen, or do you want me to share my screen for this next part?
Do you mind just showing the full slide through the engagement, and then I've got the website up. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
So we're talking about engagement. We've talked a lot about a lot of the research behind it, the approach with engagement. And so now we're really talking about practical things. So engagement has to do with so many different things. And as an OT, I love this category because we're also talking about sensory and self-regulation options, right? How we adapt our classrooms, how we give movement breaks, how we allow students to physically access materials, and how we recruit that interest in their frame of reference, right, in their lives. And so if you look, the slide here is on your PDF as well, but there are some of the sub areas of the actual engagement section. But what I want to focus in on is this wonderful classroom at the bottom here. And I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. And ironically, this is can everyone see my screen? Are we thumbs up? Awesome, wonderful. This is from the Indiana Patents Project. So this is a UDL initiative that was started many years ago in Indiana, and is growing hopefully the way we will be growing over the years. And they've made an interactive classroom. We're actually in the process of trying to make a New Mexico interactive classroom because, as we know, New Mexico is unique and wonderful, and we want to make sure that our students' voices are seen in a classroom as well. But and the link is on the slide, but as we tour around this classroom, we're going to see a whole bunch of different learning options. So some of those, like I said, are environmental. So over here, it could be as simple as something.
Clusters of desks allow for collaboration and flexible groups to practice and demonstrate social skills and teamwork while completing tasks and assignments.
There we go. It reads each one out loud as well for accessibility, right? So flexible seating choices, flexible grouping with students. These are things that we talk about as options, but we don't often give much of a choice. And so when using teamwork, a lot of students learn in different ways. They either become very distracted, like I do when other people are around when I'm trying to get something done, or they really need to work through the problem with a peer. Choices for seating and clusters are really important. Also, let's reach back here. And
a hockey stool is another option for flexible seating that allows for students to move while seated.
As an OT, I love flexible seating options for sensory input too. And I will tell you, when an entire class of general education and special education, no matter what your title is, students in a classroom, that you cannot predict who's going to like these sensory options, but it makes a huge difference for output in the classroom. We also have some wonderful things here.
Megan, can I interrupt really quick on that?
My apologies. There we go. Oh, sorry.
Resources.
My apologies.
Resources are shared accessibly.
Go ahead.
That's my bad. So with something as simple as a hockey stool, I had a student I was working with the other day. He has some degree of ADD and he's always moving. And so even when he's sitting still, his leg is going up and down or his hands are moving. And he had a teacher tell him the other day, if you can't sit still, you must have anxiety. I think you just have severe anxiety and you need to go see a counselor. And so he came to me and he's like, what's anxiety? I was told I have anxiety. What do I need to do? I'm like, what are you anxious about? He's like, nothing that I know of. I just can't sit still. So we were looking at different things that he could hold or squeeze or things he could sit on. And if he could sit on that, his leg would not be going up and down all the time. And he could have that movement that he needs to be able to focus. But the teacher unknowingly didn't realize that he just needs that movement and thinks that something's really wrong with him if he can't just sit still, not realizing that his brain is created uniquely as a fingerprint. And that's just how he functions. So
Oh,
Yeah,
Kim, it's such a good point. And, it's so interesting because we only punish people for that behavior within a school environment, usually. When you get into adulthood, you go into jobs where you can move. You use that strength. There's a huge percentage of individuals with learning differences in ADHD who own small businesses, much larger than people who are diagnosed with ADHD or with learning differences, because they are outside of the box thinkers, they are movers and shakers, they are energetic and engaged. So we need to be able to bring those practical job skills into our classrooms and show that as a strength as well, and just give options for that student to be able to engage, right? That's a great example. So I would love for you guys to kind of explore some of these other options.
For translated instruction through an app
your
like
own
Microsoft
time.
Translator can level the playing field for students learning English. Caption access to all verbal instruction can support increased engagement, vocabulary knowledge, comprehension, and recall for most all students.
So I brought this one up because Microsoft Translate and our students who have multiple languages in the state, which is such a strength, but can be a challenge in a classroom when you're mastering a second or third language. We have tools built into the classroom that are already there, like Microsoft Translate, that will actually translate live on a projected screen in front of the classroom. That's a free thing offered to anyone, along with translation things like what we're about to talk about in Snap and Read. We need to provide these opportunities for students so they can show us what they know, and not just which language they're talking in, or processing in. So did anybody else have anything in this classroom that you wanted to point out before we moved on to Snap and Read?
So I just wanted to show the chair that's sitting on the floor has one more flexible seating. I think if you scroll back around. So UDL does not always have to be technology. It's right there. Perfect. This chair is awesome. It folds up, but it gives another environment for our students to be able to learn differently. They don't always have to be in a desk or in a chair. They could be standing, as you notice, as Cami pointed out. I'm standing now. I'm a mover and a shaker. I can't sit all day. So I have to keep moving and I talk with my hands. But super simple items. They don't have to be high tech. UDL also truly involves low tech. So we dropped a link in the chat to this classroom. It's really worth taking a look through, sharing with others. As we said, we are going to be building one based in New Mexico, so you can see things that we're using with our own students here in New Mexico. A lot of teachers are doing a lot of this already. So that's why we feel it's super important to see that it doesn't always have to be a computer or a device. And especially now we've learned with COVID, we're really having to adapt because students were at home learning. So we want to meet them where they're at. And as we talked about earlier, they might have some invisible disabilities going on or something that we don't necessarily see. So we love this, and we hope this opens up your eyes to some new insight on what it can look like in a classroom. Thanks, Megan, for popping in on that.
Not at all. Can you see the slideshow now? Or are we still on the patents project? Okay.
We're still on the patents project.
Just a second. Let me jump over.
One thing too that we've talked about is, as adults, we hide our weaknesses. And so students don't really see those. And so they think, if I'm not perfect, then it's not okay. And so just sharing those weaknesses and sharing our strengths with each other too, as a team, we do that often and we build on those. And it is really powerful.
Oops. So Janae, whoa, sorry about that. Janae, do you want to talk about any of these fabulous choice boards or meme activities? Awesome.
So with Universal Design for Learning, we offer up choice, and we've been talking about choice. Well, one thing that people may or may not be familiar with is a choice board. But also, so in that first picture there where we have Willy Wonka and we're giving our students an option to capture a meme. That doesn't always have to be paper pencil in your class, especially working with middle and high school students. They love memes. They're into memes right now. So why not have them caption a meme or create a meme to show their knowledge, to tell you what they've learned? If they can sum it up in a sentence or in a few key words to really enhance that meme, you know that they've mastered that standard or they've mastered that concept. The top one on the top left, you're giving choice and activities and ways for them to practice math. So those are digital links to manipulatives. So when you click on it, it's going to make a copy for yourself. So you own it then on your Google Drive, but you have total.
Jeez, my internet is super slow. There we go.
That's okay. So Megan just made a copy, and by clicking on that, if I needed a student to be able to tell time, or if I needed them to have counters, they can click on any of those and it'll take them right to those free manipulatives that they'll be able to use for math. So if you don't have those tools right at your fingertips, you have complete and utter access to all of that. Being able to use fractions. You can kick myself out, has the Bitmoji. I just put myself in there because it made it kind of fun to share with your students. And then in the middle there, we have this menu of choice. So if Megan pops back to our—
sorry, just a second. There, lots of juggling here. Sorry about that. There you go.
In the middle there, where it looks like a pocket chart on the carpet, this has all of these amazing choices that you can choose from. Again, we made it so you can make a copy so you could actually own it. But there are so many tools out there, things that have been created. We show you about flexible seating. We show you about all of our learning tools for co-writer, snap and read, how students can make a rap or a song. My favorite right here that Megan's on is this comic book creator. So students could actually go in there. A lot of our students are into graphic novels because that's their line and lifeline into literacy. So if they could make their own graphic novel to take maybe to teach you a concept in science, if they teach you a theme in or base it on a character for literature, if they could show you how they're solving that math problem. So know that we have these amazing resources here. There's not a lot of prep involved in it, but if you come in and you give your students maybe a couple of choices to start to get that buy-in, because sometimes too many choices are too much. But if you come in and you give them a few choices, then they're going to start to realize and see that they have a choice and they have a voice in their learning. They might be able to just draw that out for you, draw what they've learned. So there's a picture on there on that board as well that shows you a student was given a final in a cooking class, and instead of taking the written test, he was able to draw a picture of every single thing he'd learned in culinary arts. And you can see very visually every single piece. We're going to talk about his work later on again, but just know that there's step-by-step. And then this last thing on the bottom is a step-by-step planner in lesson design. If you click on that, it gives you lesson ideas, questions to ask that will help you plan out your lesson. I love this guide for any teacher. It takes you through all of our areas of engagement, the 3 areas of the brain, and it asks specific questions on your lesson to make sure that you're meeting the needs of all of those students. I'll pause for a second because I think Caroline had her hand up.
Yes.
Oh, you were talking about graphic novels, and I've taught, when I was in Denton, Texas, I would teach 4 different English levels for resource, and our seniors had never, or our students had never been given any type of the literature that the gen ed kids were learning. So I did that, and we learned Beowulf by graphic novel, and they would do a storyboard that. and we did To Kill a Mockingbird, and they did storyboard. And also there's a program called Edpuzzle that I absolutely love, and you can go across the curriculum and bring in history for like the Depression, or if you're doing Night by Elie Wiesel, you know, you could use that and use those also as formative assessments to see how much they're actually learning. So I'm a huge believer in all of what you were just talking about. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I love Edpuzzle. If you haven't checked out Edpuzzle, we should add that to our choice board there. It's another great way.
Oh, I love it. My husband uses it every day in his English class.
Well, and we love hearing how you guys connect with the material. So sharing stories like that is great because it shows us that you're using that representation focus area and the recognition network part of the brain, and you're connecting with everything we're saying. So thank you for sharing those.
And I want to share, can you go back to that picture?
Sorry.
I want to share two things really quick. So the comic book creator I used as a choice in one of my career readiness classes where the students were getting ready to graduate. They were seniors, and they created the comic conversation between them and somebody who would come up and ask them, what do you want to do next? And so instead of just having them write out a goal, it was the whole comic thing of what their goal is going to be and the specific steps they had to take to reach that goal of what they wanted to do immediately after they graduated. And so the students that really enjoyed art or the comics or creating dialogue really excelled using this part, and the ones that just wanted to write out an outline or a goal, you know, could do that. But that was a great way for them to have that as their steps of their goal. And then in the examples of the memes, if you guys could just drop in the chat or unmute yourself and say what caption that you would add to what you've learned so far from UDL that is that new little spark or snapshot so far of UDL. And then maybe say which of those memes you would choose. It truly is universal and a means to reach all students. Doug. And so would you be the one with the Willy Wonka guy, or the guy with the face that's like, what? Willy Wonka, look at you. You are so smart.
I love it.
Don't judge anyone for being different.
You're here.
Is that the one with Woody and Buzz? Buzz telling Woody, it's just a 7-10 split. You got this. That's awesome.
Way to bring it all together.
We're going to have to use that, Paul, with your permission in our future things. Oh, Chris's is the baby. Right. Gotcha. See, and and you guys are engaged and you're using your representation with that, and then your action and expression all coming together in all of that. Woody and Buzz, look what's possible. Wonder Woman, education is still a woman-driven profession. We have great leaders.
Aww.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we want to, we value your time, and it's 10:50. So we're gonna jump in real quick. Megan's gonna take us through some of these tools that we have to share.
There we go. So, no, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. So when we talk about representation and being able to express and access with choice, as we've talked about, this is really an approach. It's not all about technology, and that's where a lot of people go with UDL. But as an OT and an assistive technology practitioner, technology can give us some really huge tools for these things. And when we look at that as a project when this UDL team started. One of their main goals was to provide these tools and choices statewide. And so we'll go over this again at the end, but everything we're showing as far as Snap and Read, Co-Writer, UPAR, and Equatio, which we'll give you a little teaser on, is part of the initiative project that your district can apply for, and it will be funded, and not just funded, but supported. So here we have Snap and Read, which is the first one that we'll talk about, to give kids an option for how they access text-based materials. We often lock them into paper and pencil tasks, but often with either attention issues or with difficulty with reading or different language access. We need a way to kind of get that information into our system and focus on the task at hand. What is the purpose of this activity? So Snap and Read is amazing because it has text to speech, it removes distractions, it translates, it's a note taker. And so I'm just going to jump right into Snap and Read. And like I said, again, I'm not just showing something that's inaccessible to your district. This is something that we can use, that you can apply for your district. So I brought up the President's Day just because I like to bring up any holidays. Can everyone see my screen with President's Day on Wikipedia? Awesome. So along with this, oops, sorry, I need to move over the screen so you can see my Snap and Read bar over here. If I can, there we go. Can we see the bar? Thumbs up. Awesome, awesome. So Snap and Read lives in the corner here of a Chrome browser or a Chromebook or an iPad or a phone in different ways, but provides the same thing in each. And so the first thing I'm looking at with this page, I'm dyslexic and I have difficulty accessing text. And that's exactly how I access this world. And I look at this page and I see busy, awful things everywhere. When I start to read from the left to the right, I lose my place. There's all this extra stuff. So Snap and Read has this wonderful tool to remove distractions. And that is the first thing that I do when I am accessing a busy page of text. And as we know, our students have great difficulty with focus and attention. So it has a tool for reducing those distractions. And usually when I'm in a room of adults, everyone's stress level goes down when they see that. It also has some old-fashioned stuff, like when we used to make little color overlays as OTs or teachers, where we cut out boxes and helped our students read and follow text with a little extra support. Along with text reading.
President's Day, officially Washington's birthday, is a holiday in the United States celebrated on the third Monday of February to honor all persons who served in the office of president.
So we've got not just reading out loud, right? We've got something else. Does anybody have an idea of what that is? Somebody will have to tell me, because if I show chat up on the screen, I'll block everything. You see something? No? Okay. I saw something that helps me as a dyslexic because I skip line and omit words. And that was a highlighting from word to word. I can speed up that highlighting, speed up that voice, slow it down, change the color, do a ton of other features there. I have another tool here that will actually scan to read things, and we'll talk about that in a second. And a text leveler for your students who have problems or difficulty with high-level vocabulary. We want to expose our students to high-level vocabulary, but we also want to give them support so that they don't just skip over that word and ignore it. And so here I'm looking at this paragraph and I'm seeing things like specifically, victory, some other really big words in here, various. And so the next tool here for Snap and Read actually will allow us to go in and have those words leveled for us. So, one second, I did it backwards. There we go. So you can actually see it change. So now we have some words here, or we did, like clearly. Clearly used to be specific, clearly stated, particular. It is also translating it for me. I've set my language for Spanish and then went back to the original word, which was specific. This allows our students to engage with text, to be able to get the support that they need, and to be able to process that information with a little extra support. We're giving options depending on the student's reading level and their strengths and their challenges. I saw something in the chat. Could somebody, are there any questions?
It says, does Snap and Read work with Reading Plus type programs? If students prefer magazines less threatening, does it work? I have a student who is big into sports. Absolutely. So go ahead, Megan, do you want to answer how it works?
Yes. So she's just asking, or he's just asking what, if it works anywhere?
Correct.
Yes. So yes, it does. It works with almost any website. The very few that I've had that have been inaccessible, I've written an email to Don Johnston. They immediately reach out and switch the code for that site. But that has been once a year maybe. So we also, if for some reason the text is embedded in a picture, we have this scan to read, which will actually, sorry, we're moving slow because I'm running so many things at the same time, which will scan that text and read it out loud if it's not seen as text. So in just a second, my apologies.
President's Day 202%.
Now, when you scan to read, it is not always 100% because of a funky font or a weird background, but it gives access to things that previously would not be accessible at all. Great question. So here also we have an article, and what if we had a student who needed to read this or access parts of the text in a different language? At this point, I believe they have over 90 different languages. So we can select some text here, and over here, once we set the language, we have a translation tool. So we're now allowing our students to have it read to them in multiple ways. And if you click on the text, we can toggle between the two languages. So we're not taking away the original source, we're giving them options for access. Any questions?
It is not free, but I am dropping in the application into the chat because this is how your district will apply to receive this paid for by the New Mexico UDL team. So it is something your district will need to apply for. You guys are actually the first group that we're dropping our application to. So not only will you receive Snap and Read through this grant, you will receive co-writer, which we're going to talk about in a minute. You'll receive an assessment tool called UPAR, and you will also receive the math UDL tool, which is, Equatio. So go ahead, Megan, keep going.
Yeah. So there are a ton of other features with Snap and Read, but we want to make sure that we give you kind of just an overview of lots of different things. And so the last thing that I will show you is just the outlining tool, which actually my husband is using right now in his senior English classes because they're all doing their research papers. And this is a general education classroom that is using this tool as universal design. So as they read through their articles and their research, they can capture their text. Let's do this over here. And if you'll notice, the tools work on both sides. You can have these read out loud. We can change the outline and format, but this is what the adults always freak out about. We can also have that anti-plagiarism tool. Make sure you reference the author with APA, MLA, or Chicago format. So these are tools that really appeal to a wide variety of audiences. I've had kindergarten teachers use it, and kids just highlight words that they don't know yet, all the way up to senior level English classes. So awesome.
So Megan, I have a question really quick that I was thinking somebody might have, that I wasn't sure, or at least I didn't understand the way that you answered it, which is probably my perception. But if they preferred a magazine and they had a physical magazine, they could put the Snap and Read app on their phone and they could take a picture of the material they're reading, right?
Yes, that is exactly right. Sorry, my apologies. I just assumed that all magazines are digital now. That's how I access. And actually, if you have a student with a diagnosed print disability, there's also a free service called Bookshare that allows downloads of any magazine or copyrighted material for those qualifying kiddos. But yes, it does have a scan to read, and those kids can use it on their personal phones. If your district has a license, all they have to do is sign in on their phone and take a picture anywhere in the world and have it read out loud. So great question, and thank you for clarifying. Is there anything else in the chat before we move on?
Nope, I think we grabbed it.
So they could actually do that then with any assignment, any worksheet, anything, right? They could take a picture of that and have it read out loud to them.
Yes, and not only that, but then they can annotate on top of it with co-writer and Snap and Read together. And I'll show you an example of that in just a second. So it makes any classroom accessible just through these tools. So I sound so much like a commercial. My apologies. I just so love these tools. So the last section that we're talking about, of course, is action and expression. And action and expression tool that we are offering is co-writer through this project. And co-writer is a writing tool that provides an incredibly smart word prediction tool. Sorry, just a second. Let me move this drawer over so you can see it. Maybe. There we go. So as we start writing, we're going to have a new thing pop up here, and it is word prediction. So if I'm writing about President's Day, I can listen. United. Oh, look at that.
United.
I'm a very phonetic speller. A lot of my students are too, or they just come up with their own rules. But we want them to be able to express themselves at their cognitive level. United. Oh, wait a minute. It's really smart. It's starting to sense that I needed to talk about the United States. President. Oh, look at that. President. So as I'm composing, I am being given multi-sensory cues on how to spell the word. It's extremely smart. It is listening to what I'm saying and giving guesses in context. I even see like Bush down there as number 5, guessing that maybe I was talking about President Bush. And that's not the most recent one. And so as I'm writing, it's giving me the supports I need to be able to express myself. This box will work anywhere on the internet. It is also an app on the iPad. And it has some really deep features as far as being able to predict and learn from a student. They can also
Groundhog Day.
Have topic dictionaries. So if I knew what we were going to do for the day, then we could have a topic dictionary about President's Day. So let's see, oh, there we go. U.S. presidents.
U.S. presidents.
Now it knows for sure what I'm
Groundhog
talking
Day.
about. And when I go back, and I put in, there we go, Obama. OB might originally have come up with obvious or object, but Obama comes up because it knows of the presidents I'm talking about. Obama is there. This can be amazing for your students who have all of the words in their head, high level vocabulary, but just really have challenges in getting it out and expressing themselves. I see lots of cool stuff in the chat. Can anyone catch me up?
So they were excited that it capitalized presidents for you. That and I said, yes, we do recognize if it's a proper noun, it'll predict that. So has Megan highlights over the words? It'll read the words. So if your students are still struggling with reading, but they have some sense of the spelling, it'll highlight that. But also, Megan can also, she's turning it to actually to read the content back. And then I don't want to step on your thunder, Megan, but students who really are struggling with writing as well, they can dictate. And it is not the $1,000 that we'd have to use for Dragon Naturally Speaking. Like, it's all built into this. So go ahead, Megan.
Right. Well, really quick, let me interrupt right there. So yes, with the dictating, that's huge. And I worked primarily with a lot of high school students, especially high school juniors and seniors, that they could dictate, but their language isn't like how you write. And so then when they dictate, you get these and and these slangs and buts and it doesn't sound right. And so when they can hover over it and read it back, they're like, that's not right. And then they can change it with the prediction, which is so huge, because I had students struggle so much with words like there would be a word in the passage that they were reading that they had to write about, and it would be like excruciating, but they would read it as exercise or excursion, which then totally changes the meaning of the passage. And without this tool to read some of it out loud to them, then they're writing about something completely different. And then it makes them sound like they just made something up and they're not trying, when really they were trying, but they were writing about exercise because that's what they thought the word was. And so this changes everything for them to be able to put their thoughts coherently into writing.
Awesome. Yeah, it really opens a lot of doors for expression for our students. And so, and it can be gauged for all levels. So the last thing I want to mention really fast is the translation feature. So not only
translate writing from Spanish into English.
So as the student's writing, if they are, somebody spelled buenos for, or let's see.
Hola.
There we go. Gato. Do you see on number 4? I've written the word gato. Terrible pronunciation. My apologies. I'm from Indiana. It took 8 years of French. Anyway, and number 4 though comes up as cat. It gives an extra prompt if you turn that on to help the student find the word that they were looking for. And if you'll notice here in the dictation feature, you can also say a word, say a sentence in Spanish, and it will translate for English, or 7 different other languages. So this is a really big tool for our students.
Again, your district has the opportunity to get this if they apply on that link that I dropped for that application. And I'm sorry for this. It should have said, here's the application to apply, not here's the application to application. It's multitasking. But I will drop it again. Go ahead, Megan.
Oh no, I was just going to bring up and show that it also works within annotation features. So if you're have a teacher who's still giving traditional worksheets, then the student can take a picture or they can scan it. And then you can write on top of the worksheet, draw, make shapes and connections that you wouldn't be able to make with a student who wasn't able to read that text independently.
Turn our closed captioning back on because we like to model what we are showing here. So in this next slide here, we know, many of us know that we in the state of New Mexico have been given several initiatives. And so we are trying to show you how by looking at curriculum and content and everything that we do in our classroom through the Universal Design for Learning lens, we are also touching on all of these initiatives from the state. So we're trying to help you take things off your plate. If you're looking and designing lessons through the UDL lens, you're meeting the goals of MLSS. You're meeting the needs of your special ed students. You are automatically building in SEL or SEL. We know that this is the year of literacy, so you're touching on that. In a few slides, we're going to talk about the difference between Universal Design for Learning and differentiated instruction and how they are similar, but yet they're different. And so we really love this quote of UDL is not a special ed thing or even a general ed thing. It's just an ed thing. It's a way to connect with every student to their learning experience. So we actually love this shirt and soon we'll be on t-shirts. So that's our little plug there. So with that, find my mouse here. I'm going to jump to the next slide. And Cami or Candace, if you guys want to jump, I think Candace is up or Cami's up first on this one, but we want to show you basically this is like a window frame or like a picture frame. And if we frame it for Universal Design for Learning, you can see that representation, engagement, and action and expression, all of those are framed around these initiatives. And the first one we're going to just briefly go over is the SEL piece.
And so with the social emotional learning, that's one of the initiatives of the PED is functioning within the 7 mindsets. And those 7 mindsets are briefly just the fact that everything is possible, right? Like dream big, passion first, that you focus on your strengths, that everybody's connected so that you have that partnership of learning how to work with other people and learn their value. And then 4 is that there's 100% accountability, meaning that they need to have that voice with that choice, and that there's an attitude of gratitude where you can thank it forward and then live to give, where they can help others and think outside themselves, and then that the time is now and to be engaged and in the moment. And so as you can see that within those 7 mindsets, that those are the principles that we've been talking about with UDL, so that when you can view the classroom through a UDL lens, those 7 mindsets and that social emotional learning is happening naturally, in that it's not, oh, I have to do this MLSS thing and I have to do this UDL thing and now I have to do this SEL thing. That when we see it through the UDL lens, the social emotional learning is happening naturally. These 7 mindsets are part of seeing through a UDL lens, as well as the MLSS opening up that that engagement and leveling everything out on that first level for MLSS also. And I think it's really interesting on this. I was talking to an 8th grader the other day and asked him what the word gratitude mean. And he said, is that like altitude, like it's high? And I was like, he's 8th grade and he's a sharp kid, but he just doesn't have that vocabulary. He's not in SPED. But he had no idea what gratitude is. And so we talk about all these things. Everything is possible, passion first, accountability, attitude of gratitude. And it's like we're speaking a foreign language. They don't even know what some of that stuff is. And that really opened my eyes to that too. as we go through this. And so this is how it connects to UDL. This is just an example. So like within the action and expression, to show how a student has mastered a skill, how are we connecting those dots to social emotional learning happening within the 7 mindsets? Well, when we're allowing for that physical action and for those varied responses as a way for them to show what they're learning that self-awareness and that self-management is happening naturally within the engagement of knowing that everything is possible and dreaming big and pulling in their interests. And then in the expression and communication part, using all those different multimedia things that Megan just showed you with the snap and read and the co-writer, and how they can use different tools to construct their thoughts and show what they've learned, that social awareness and relationship skills is happening as they work with others and they share and communicate what it is that they've been learning. As well as number 2 and number 3 of the 7 mindsets, as well, and 5 and 6. And then when we look at the executive functions on how are they setting goals, how are they making those decisions of what they're going to do next, and managing that information and monitoring their progress and having their progress monitored by teachers, and showing that they know what they learned through different quick formative assessments. That's creating those responsible decision-making skills of the social emotional learning and bringing in number 4 and number 7 in the 7 mindsets, all happening at the same time just by offering the voice with the choice and seeing it through the UDL lens.
Perfect. Oops. So now I'm going to jump back up here. Nope. Hold on. Jump back up for Candace. Okay.
So multi-layered systems of support is really big around New Mexico right now because we're transitioning from RTI, response to interventions. But really it's looking at the systems in our schools, and it's talking about, how are we going to respond to those students who are not reaching their goals and who are having those gaps. So how are we going to intervene, and how are we going to boost them up so that they get those skills and they don't lose them? So UDL really fits nicely with MLSS because we're doing a lot of the work in the forefront. So we're trying to plan so that those gaps don't happen. And then there's fewer students that we have to go and fill those gaps with. So one thing is that it also ties into when we talk about all of this is this balanced assessment system. So we're constantly progress monitoring in our classrooms. But I think one thing to note and to remind teachers is that we're doing this and we don't even realize that we're doing it, but we need to make sure that we're noticing those progress monitors and we're talking about them. And a big thing with MLSS is PLCs, which is us coming together and collaborating because we all have a lot of knowledge to share with each other, and talking about those progress monitorings that are happening in our classroom is a good way to find out if our students are understanding and getting the content that they're needing. So some things through a UDL lens is that we don't always have to assess them paper pencil. We can assess them through different hands-on manipulatives, as long as we maybe make a rubric, or maybe you can even have them vocalize some of these standards and see if they've reached them without the paper pencil tasks. So this down here at the bottom just kind of shows some of those examples of formative assessments through a UDL lens. Oops, sorry. I did it twice, but that's okay. So as you see at the top, we're now zooming in on those formative assessments, and just some ideas. Instead of the paper pencil, we can have those comic strips, those projects, those Mad Libs, cartoons. It's just a nice little list to remind ourselves as teachers that those are progress monitorings as well.
So the next tool that we are offering as part of this New Mexico UDL grant is UPAR Universal. So it's an assessment tool that with reading, a lot of our students decode well enough to understand the text, but they don't understand, and others understand while listening to the content read aloud. So UPAR helps us give us this data to really understand the way our students learn best. So Are they a decoder? Do they understand auditorially? And we absolutely love this tool because it's instant data. It instantly shows us how our students learn best. And then that helps us guide our lessons and helps us meet their needs. So along with that grant that districts can apply for, and I'm going to be grabbing that link here in just a second and dropping it in the chat to make sure that we're not giving you the edited form, but the form that actually gives you the to take the to fill out the application. You will get Co-Writer Universal, Snap and Read Universal, and UPAR Universal. These 3 tools, plus we have one more, are so exciting. And not only are they technology tools, but they're game-changing tools for all of our students. They really are going to give them that opportunity to really share their voice. And we will really know what they have learned and mastered.
Can I add real fast? Just want to say that the information that you get from UPAR can empower your kids too. I've seen such transformational changes in kids who are all of a sudden told that they're not terrible readers, that they have ways of reading that make them successful. And many of the kids who are maybe an 8th grade, but a 2nd grade reading level determined by, standardized tests, can understand even above grade level. And it's the first time they've heard that. I've had many kids tell me, no one's ever told me I'm smart before. And that is such an amazing opportunity.
So sorry, this got jumped out of order, but
no, we can touch, UPAR really ties into this well, because multi-layered systems of supports really looks at that data, and UPAR is a nice form of data that we can bring to those PLCs through MLSS. And you can see there layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3, and how UDL fits nicely in all of those layers, because what you're doing is you're trying to adapt for all students, and therefore you're not having to, like I said earlier, like later fill in those gaps with them.
Awesome. And then I know, Erica, you had a question in the chat. I don't want to, we're going to get to your question about appropriate goal settings. So we're almost there. We have a couple more slides about these next few are important to understand. Universal design for learning and differentiated instruction, because many times we hear these interchanged, and they really are not to be used interchanged. They hold some similarities, but they also hold differences as well. And so that's why we took this Venn diagram to kind of break it out and best describe it. And so Cami or Candace, did you guys want to do this? Because I ran through it really fast last time and I didn't know if you guys wanted to take a deeper dive into it. Or do you want me to keep going?
Either way, I don't mind helping out too.
Okay. So if we look here, what is unique to Universal Design for Learning? So in Universal Design for Learning, we are proactively reviewing a classroom instruction in the environment. We prepare plans with thoughtful goals, lessons, and activities. We really try to focus on a primary goal. And in just a minute, we're going to see an example where sometimes we think we have a primary goal, but yet that primary goal is actually giving us 3 goals within 1 goal. We want to plan lessons and activities that anticipate the student's strengths and also the barriers that might fall into place. So if there's a strength, we want to look at that unique learning profile. So that takes us back to our jagged learning profile. And we also want to look at the barriers. Remember, the barriers are not our students. They are not our students. So it could be a physical, mental, emotional, something to do with the curriculum, maybe something we didn't anticipate. In UDL, we always want to give that voice and that choice. And then we want to look at the views of the curriculum as flexible. So really, what's the goal at hand? And then how can our students show that they've mastered that, or how have they accomplished that? Candace, anything you want to add?
No, that was perfect. I don't mind taking the next slide if you'd like me to.
Okay, go for it.
So differentiated instruction really focuses on that data. So we are using those modifications, and we're trying to help the students to learn the information that they may have missed or they may need to make up for. So what we're doing is we're monitoring them, we're assessing them, we're looking at the data, and then we're trying to go back and get them that information that they may have not got the first time, or that maybe somehow there's like a disconnect with. So it's data driven. It is also used in that MLSS that I talked about earlier, especially in layers 2 and 3, because you're trying to individualize those interventions and you're trying to make them specific for those students.
Perfect. And then this next one is similarities between UDL and differentiated instruction. So it's really important to see that now we've talked about them individually, where their strengths lie, but then also now where are they similar? Both of them meet individual needs of our students. We are giving access to the same high quality content. I think that's really key, because in both differentiated and universal design for learning, we don't ever want to take the high quality content away from our students. Because many times we see that if they can't master it, we feel like we have to almost dumb down the curriculum, but we don't want to do that. We just want to change the delivery of how we're getting it. Both of them emphasize critical thinking and strategic learning. Both of them create highly supported, engaging and learning environments. We want to give access to students' progress during the learning and adjust as needed. And then we want this to occur during independent practice and or progress monitoring. So in both of them, we are looking at the data and we're adjusting our teaching as we're going. So for those folks, many times they don't think that data really drives the instruction, and they're like, oh, it's one more test. But really, if it's appropriate data and it's done correctly and you really analyze the data, then you are making an impact in your students' learning. Cami or Candice, do you want to jump in on the last few?
Yeah, and the data that she's talking about can be the progress monitoring done in the classroom, which is usually the most powerful data because it's really quick, it's there in your hands, and you can change your content immediately, and you can add in those accommodations and modifications that you need to add in. But as you can see, they do appear very similar, but hopefully with what we've been talking about, you can see that they are different, as UDL is really done in the planning stages and the goal setting, and differentiated instruction is done along the way more so.
I love it. So let's look at these next ones here. So, does anybody want to talk about this one? Or do you want me to?
Yeah, so examples of the differentiated instruction through a UDL lens. We have our New Mexico UDL website there. And if they click on that, Janae, what exactly will they be brought to?
They're going to come to our actual website so you can see all of our resources. This is where we'll house our webinars and this training as well. And then also where you can sign up for our cafes. So anything that has to do with New Mexico UDL, any information, breaking news, any of that fun and exciting stuff, we will have on our website for you.
Thanks. And so when we're thinking about the examples of the differentiated instruction through a UDL lens, we need to think about what is the primary goal of the lesson and make sure that we're just doing one thing at a time. And so sometimes people say, oh, it sounds like you're doing differentiated instruction when we're talking about UDL. And that's because, like what we just discussed, there's a lot of similarities and a lot of them happen together. So when you do UDL, you don't have to necessarily differentiate for every single different student, because when you provide them when you anticipate the barriers and then you provide them that menu of options for the student choice, for them to have that voice and that self-advocacy, then they themselves are selecting something that's according to their strength. So then you didn't have to end up differentiating exactly for them individually, but then you can support their learning to identify those individual choices that help them to best show mastery. And then you can differentiate anything beyond that if it's even needed. And then a lot of times just helping the student reflect back on their strategy, because sometimes they might choose something that wasn't best for them. And so then helping them choose something else to see if that works better, because a lot of times I see my students choose something because their friend chose it, but that wasn't like the best thing for them. So then you can say what worked best for you and why. And then there's this collaborative feedback, either between the teacher and the student or group wise and the teacher. And they can say, well, this worked for my friend Timmy, but this did not work for me. So I want to try something different next time. Okay, great. What do you want to try? And then you have that whole feedback with them reassessing their goal and trying something new. And so that's kind of that example of how the differentiation of instruction happens within the UDL lens. And then so by doing that, we can create expert learners who then become purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, and strategic and goal-directed. And I think we have an example of a lesson of that. So these are things that we have all said ourselves in the classroom, or that we've heard others say. Like, why are my students engaged? Why aren't they motivated? I taught it. Why didn't they learn it? Or they just don't care. Or I think the most common one I hear from other teachers is they're just lazy. And it's not. They're actually probably stuck on an escalator.
That's a great tie-in. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of our kids don't have the skills to be able to make choices because we don't allow that in our classrooms. They need to be taught that. And in a job setting, the employers depend on people being able to choose the best way that they can finish a project. Yeah, we're not preparing them for the real world.
Right. And so I actually talked to a student who's going into 9th grade, and she had tested into the early college high school that we have here. And so she'll graduate in 4 years with her diploma as well as her associate's degree. And her first task over the summer was to read this book and then communicate what she had learned, either in a newspaper article type way, a diary, or through an essay. And I do life coaching also and counseling, and she had ended up coming to me because she had such anxiety over making a choice and being so afraid that she was going to make the wrong choice, that it dawned on all of us, like, here she is at 15 years old and she doesn't know how to make a choice and is so scared of making the wrong choice. She said, I just want my teacher to tell me what to do, and here's how to do it, because that's what she learned for 10 solid years. And once she learned that there wasn't a wrong choice, it was just how she best wants to represent what she learned, then she excelled. But it was getting through like 3 months of anxiety over just making one choice.
Well, and good point, Cami. And these quotes really remind me of that. All of us read Harry Wong in college, or most of us did at least. And this reminds me, he always said, the students should be going home more tired than the teacher. And universal design for learning is definitely a way to make that happen.
Absolutely. So Cami's going to talk through, move this out of your guys' way. I'm so sorry. She's going to talk through this example of how we teach perimeter.
And let's see, Logan said that the escalator situation reminded her of a math problem her friends and her could not understand back in school because they just did not have the knowledge to understand the problem. And that's such a timely thing as we're going to talk about math right now. And I think that's because a lot of times, to me, math is a foreign language. It's a whole different language, and you have to learn how to translate English into math. And the only way you can do that is if teachers will identify what goal they're trying to teach one goal at a time, then identify those barriers, bring in background knowledge that they can draw from to understand. So if we're going to talk about perimeter, I don't just use the terms perimeter and 2L plus 2W equals P, because that means nothing. I could just make up words in a sense, and it would mean the same thing to people. And so we can bring in the background knowledge of like a fence. If kids have a fence around their property, then they could understand that's the perimeter. We could walk the edge of the classroom. That's perimeter. If they Minecraft, they create things around the perimeter. If they do 3D printing, if they've ever been around like a square fire pit or a rectangular fire pit, if they they can pick something out of their brains that relates to perimeter, then all of a sudden we have that connection, right? And that connection wasn't made for you, Logan, and that's how come you just couldn't grasp that problem, right? So then we can actually physically do it. So if we're in elementary, we can walk around the edge of the room and count how many footsteps it takes to get around the perimeter. We can discuss it as a class. They can individually or with a small group build a wall or a fence or a barrier out of the options the teachers give, like the Legos, clay, Minecraft, stacking books, paper clips, yardsticks, duct taping it on the floor, blocks, right? Drawing, but they get to choose how they're going to show that they understand perimeter. And then they're going to relate it to the shape that they make. Is it a square? Is it a rectangle? Is it a triangle? And then they can share with each other, the class, what worked or didn't work. And then instantly progress monitoring is happening, and the instructor is able to assess understanding. And then once they get what perimeter is and they can show it, which is just a 5-second thing that me as a teacher can walk up and go, show me perimeter, right? By pointing to something in the room, tracing something that you have around your desk or what you just made. And then I can give them a grade for that instantaneously. Then later I connect that vocabulary to L and W and P and what that is. Middle school and high school is similar, but we're going to take it one step farther. They can tell me in a rap what the perimeter is. They could do a song, they could do Flipgrid, they could do a short video on their phone and send it to my email. They can do a podcast. They could raise their hand and with their elbow partner show me. But then later is when we want to connect it step by step to length plus width equals perimeter, and then telling what the L and the W is when we shorten it. And then showing how there's two L's. So that's why we say 2L and 2W, and that's why we say 2W. And so in our next slide in a video, there's a bodybuilding perimeter thing, which I've used in my high school. And that's where they lay on the ground and you say, they get in groups of 4 and you shout out a shape, or 4 or 5, and you say triangle, square, rectangle. And then the extra person has to walk the perimeter or fill in the area, like with foam blocks or whatever. But that's the little video she's showing where you can use the duct tape for any shape, a trapezoid, a parallelogram, whatever it is. And they walk the perimeter of it. And after they understand perimeter, then you can go into the formulas. So we used to go outside and measure the perimeters of anything they wanted to find outside, going all the way around a building, around a flower bed, around a fire pit, whatever. And then that connected it to it so that they didn't forget. And then to create a choice board based on that, like what Janae has there, only that's all based around the formulas for area and perimeter. And so then they can go into that on their own and then show you how they've learned area or perimeter within 5 seconds or less as you walk around the room.
And Cami, all of those ways that you just talked about engage the students. Those activities are engaging. They allow the students to connect with all of the parts of those math lessons. And then it also allows them to know how they could express themselves when they go to show you what they've learned.
Yeah. And so it's tough sometimes when you talk to a student and they're like, oh, I think perimeter is P, which is 2L plus 2W. And you go, okay, what is that? Show me in the real world. How is that? And they cannot connect it at all. So then what was the point of even teaching it? Because they can't use it to fence in a little garden area or to make a fire pit or do anything like that.
I love it. And so we know the importance of math and the value of it. And so that is why our next tool that we're providing is Equatio. This is currently free to all educators, but we also want to make sure many educators see this, but they don't know necessarily how to use it or have the training behind it. And so Equatio ties into so many different programs. It's a collaborative workspace that allows for our students to bring math together. It goes in and it'll do handwriting recognition. So if our students are writing math problems, it'll recognize their math problems, and then it'll convert them into an actual print of the written problem.
Which is so huge on that, Janae, because I've seen so many kids that have literally gotten low grades in math because the teacher can't read their writing, or they can't read some of their writing. And so then they don't know if there's a negative sign or where the parenthesis is. And so that is a huge thing to level the playing field, no matter whether they have a diagnosed disability or not.
Absolutely. Well, and I think like many, handwriting has not been a focus anymore. And so kids, and especially so many of our students now, when we look at that gap from 2 years, like our kindergartners who would have been 2 years ago kindergarten are now almost second graders, and they didn't get a lot of that formative one-on-one handwriting instruction. So this is huge. It'll also do speech input. So the students can say their problem. They can say like 2x plus 3x equals. So there's that dictation piece. And I don't know if you all are like, we see the three of us, or the four of us, math is very language based now. So for students to be able to have math read to them, to have a screenshot reader, to have an equation editor that always has those math signs in there, this is game changing for math. And I think many times there's this fear, instantaneous fear for math, but our hope now is that students find this love for math, and that they run and jump in that. And so this we will have a full training on with it, on how to use Equatio. We have a few more things we want to share, so I don't want to dive too much into it. This is kind of a teaser on it. But know that this is something also that will be provided in our New Mexico UDL grant. This next video, I'm going to have to be creative here to share this. So let me make sure you all can see my screen here. Please don't judge all my tabs.
Before you start it, Janae,
yes,
Erica had asked about goal setting, and we're going to get into that next after this video. So just kind of pay attention to how he sets his goals up, and how he maneuvers through his lesson.
Absolutely. I hope I have the right one, and that you guys can hear.
And see if you can pick out where he's engaging and providing that representation and action and expression.
You got the This I Believe out, right? We're doing the 5-minute quick write about your feelings on public speaking in general, okay?
So we had done a project last quarter that they had to present for and speak publicly to a larger group, and I noticed a lot of kids were visibly anxious and afraid up there. So I thought, I have some time at the end of the year. Why not do a whole unit on public speaking?
Okay, so you guys can use your notebooks. You can pull up scrap paper up here, or you can type on your phones. Remember, if we're using our phones, it is for that purpose only, okay? And what I'd like you to do is just kind of summarize maybe your initial thought in a sentence and just share it with the person next to you, okay? Go ahead.
I like public speaking. It gives me a chance to share what I think with other people.
I like public speaking, Emily.
Our public speaking unit, last one of the year, okay? It's going to be kind of quick, but hopefully we can get some, good practice in, good exposure. So it kind of leads me into why we're doing public speaking. All
This
right?
is a huge barrier for a lot of people. People I know, colleagues, even adults, it's very difficult for them to public speak. So I had to think about, okay, what are my expectations and what do I want them to be able to do, and how can I capture that? And what are the different ranges of difficulty and challenge in expressing themselves? So whether or not it's to a small group or just to me by myself, or not even, if that's like outside the box and not even give it to people, but put it on a video.
So, we first need to set a goal for ourselves, for the whole unit in general. Okay, so in the next few weeks, what do we want to be able to do? So the following goals are posted around the room. Think about your response to the bell ringer and comfort level with public speaking. Choose a goal that is, and I'm going to say realistic, yet challenging, something you can strive towards. And then you're going to pull one of the tabs. So if you look around the room, I have these things posted. Right, the first one, by the end of this unit, I will be able to deliver a speech in front of the whole class. That's kind of like that big step, big goal. Next one, by the end of the unit, I will be able to deliver a speech in front of a partner or small group. The third one, by the end of this unit, I will be able to deliver a speech to Mr. Costa. That is over on my chair. If you want to do that, you can pull a tab. So that's basically saying you're not comfortable in front of peers, but maybe in front of me you are. Then by the end of this unit, I will be able to deliver a speech on video. If you're not comfortable delivering a speech to people, right? If we're groaning about giving a speech publicly, you know, things are changing nowadays. We have more technology. It could be possible to do a webinar, right, where you're giving a speech to people electronically. So if you want to do that one, you can come grab a tab there.
Yeah. The group. I chose small group. Sorry, what'd you do? The partner one. Yeah, it's easier to speak from a smaller group. Yeah. Bigger group.
The goal of the lesson was to more or less zoom into tone and word choice, giving a speech, and considering the audience and, you know, what tone and what word choice is going to best reach that audience.
Alrighty, I said I wrote my own This I Believe, so I'm going to share that. It's actually posted up on the board, but does anyone want a just kind of paper copy to follow along with?
So I wrote 2 versions of the same kind of speech with the same idea because I wanted students to first look at mine and look at my word choice, tone, and audience in mind, and think about how I changed it from speech to speech.
Help them self-regulate and allow them to set and accomplish challenging goals and objectives. All right, so I wrote another This I Believe speech that I'm going to share right now. One of my students once said, "Learning is different for everyone and happens in all different kinds of ways."
So the first one was more towards teachers, and it was much more in detailed and explained it more.
And I picked a 6-year-old audience to use an extreme, use hopefully an accessible extreme audience. You know, not all these learners are in the same place, and they might not all know the precise language for some of the things they're trying to get across, but so taking a more complex idea and simplifying it, I think would be a lot more accessible than, you know, taking a simple idea and making it as complex as you could.
Your first task, rewrite and share your This I Believe speech for a 6-year-old audience in mind. All right? If you do not want to do a 6-year-old, maybe you have no idea what a 6-year-old thinks or, you know, feels, you can pick another extreme, right? A grandparent, maybe the president, maybe, you know, you think back and you pick like a medieval knight or a caveman or something. You really got to like explain it. I don't know, something extreme, but something that's gonna, so you don't just take your This I Believe and rewrite it, right? You have to rewrite it with that audience in mind, okay? So you can use the graphic organizer, or you can just kind of look at it and jot down on a regular piece of paper. I do have a digital copy on my PowerSchool Learning page if you guys want to use one of the laptops and do it digitally. Some more choices, you can share with a partner verbally, or you can record your speech and give it to them when you're getting feedback, okay? And lastly, I can be here if you want me to conference with you or look over some things. We all good so far? Any questions?
But how would you explain to accept like everyone to a 6-year-old? Be nice to everyone. Yeah, that's one way, but how do you feel vulnerable?
And
if you swap, what would happen if I swapped?
If you swap
would
those, oh my
really
God.
make a bad impression to the Board of Education. Like, wait.
So once they were done self-assessing and taking a step back and looking at their own work, they were to deliver the speech with a variety of options to a partner.
Everybody knows that all kids need to go to school, but not all kids are given good lunches. The school lunches in America are not good for you. Being nice to everyone makes you and everyone around you seem nice, like a good person. Being nice is something to own it and be proud of it.
Every day you have to wake up at 5 in the morning to go to school, but during snack time you're so tired that you fall asleep and miss a lot of good information. What do you do then? Every school should start later and let kids sleep in because kids wouldn't need
I think that you did use words that the audience can understand and would find interesting. And you did use words that will capture their attention, but you repeated yourself a lot.
I did, yeah. I said
So
Santa Claus
I don't
like
know
5
if they,
times.
I feel like they would kind of like stop listening.
You use a tone that demonstrates respect for and knowledge of the audience. Yes, because you show that you know the knowledge of it too. Okay, so it was good. Thank you. And then to end it, I think you could probably just have like one closing sentence to wrap it up and then be done.
Yeah. Just like keep it short because
Yeah.
the attention span is short.
All right, so on a Post-it or a sticky note, tell me which unit goal, right, when you took the tab, the bigger goal for the end of the unit, which one you did and why. So kind of like the conversation you had with the partner in your group. And then you're going to post it in a specific place on the stoplight. So post it on green if you think you're ready for that goal today. You know, it's very likely you're probably not, but it's okay if you are, and it's great if you are. You're going to put it on yellow if you're not sure if you're ready. You know, you're kind of getting there, but you could still use some practice. Or red if you're totally, definitely not ready to kind of meet that goal.
What we would do after this lesson is not only finish our work from today, but look at the smaller minutia of public speaking. So we had, we have those ideas and we have those concepts, but now looking at, eye contact, pacing, projection, and all those things are important when you're delivering a speech, because if you have something you believe and something strong, but they can't hear it, or they can't hear it, it's not going to reach the audience.
So many good things.
Logan, Logan, you had a great point in the chat about, particularly with science and math, saying the same thing can become so technical. And I think that we discourage learning if students cannot figure out how to decode the language being used. Absolutely. I think that's a huge piece of UDL, that if we can visually, auditorily, if we, I think of multisensory instruction. Like if we can hit our students in all the different modalities and essentially break the code for them, we've let them in and we've opened this knowledge for them. So that's part of the reason we chose this video as well, because he really modeled the goal setting and how to break it down. And I personally wish so many teachers that I had would have done this to so many different lessons that I went in school. And then it makes me reflect back on my own teaching too. I always feel bad for my first and second year students that I had. I'm like, oh, where are they now? Like if I knew what I knew now to meet them then, it's better. But I feel that's why so many of us are in this profession. We're lifelong learners and we grow and we change and we do better. And so anybody else have thoughts on this?
Erica was saying that answered my question about goal setting. It's such a good, just like experiential answer, right? To have a good teacher model good frameworks. So.
Yeah, thank you. It was super clear. And I wasn't sure if you meant like IEP goal setting or learning target goal setting. This is a slightly different framework of goal setting. And it also, what I imagine is that every goal is worth the same amount of points. Every goal is equally valued, which seems super important.
Thank you for making that point. I so appreciate that because I come from a special ed background. And I think if I was sitting in your place, that's the first thing I would think about is my my annual measurable goal? Are we talking about that? Or are we talking about the, what goal? So thank you, because I think we'll include that now in our future presentations.
Yeah, I often have teachers say that they can't adapt work. They're like, this assignment, I've done this. This is the only way that I really find that students are able to answer the questions, with this worksheet packet, or this meets the goal. And I said, well, actually, what are you trying to, what is your goal? What do they need to learn out of this? And then when you start answering those questions, and you find that, oh, actually, there were hundreds of ways they could have reached that goal, the purpose of that lesson. And it's just having that conversation before you have a packet and you have to differentiate it for all the other kids, break that activity down. That's so hard. Why not start at the beginning?
Yeah. And Megan, like you said, with the goals, a lot of times they get the goals mixed up with the curricular standards, the goals of their lesson. And so they think that the way that they're doing their lesson, especially through packets or worksheets, is the only way they can meet that curricular standard. But we have to remember, if we go back through the curricular standards, a lot of them, like for example, in social studies, say discuss, analyze, dig deep, verbalize, or my vocabulary word just left me.
Identify.
But anyway, all of those, demonstrate. Thank you. But it doesn't say how we have to demonstrate that. It doesn't say through writing every single time, or through a test only, right? There's so many different ways that, like Candace was saying, the different formative assessments, and then with the verbal, or all the choices that we've shown you as ways to do that, meet those curricular standards also. And so that's really important when you analyze what is the exact goal that I need them to do. And so if you go back to the standards, that then helps you do those goals. I think as a teacher, sometimes I felt so overwhelmed. So it was, how do I put 7 things into one thing, and now I've got all 7 of those, check off the boxes, but then I've just confused the students because I tried to do 7 things at once.
Well, and I think we too set those multi-layered goals without even realizing it. We'll be like, okay, we're going to do this, and then we don't think about, well, what's built into doing that? What skills, underlying skills, do they have to be able to do that goal that we just set?
Right. And so how do we do that? Well, we can take one of those curricular standards and separate the means, meaning how students must demonstrate understanding, from the content of what they need to know, to make sure we're doing one at a time. And I think that brings us to our next slide.
Absolutely. That takes us right into this analyzing of goals, and then our lesson plan of the metamorphosis. So Cami, do you want to run through this?
Yeah, we just did that one, ironically, through our conversation.
Perfect.
So in this, if you guys can look at this and see, so imagine a lesson in which your students are told to read about the stages of butterfly metamorphosis and then draw a diagram of the process, right? A common thing that you would see for a day. So first you need to analyze the goal and identify the primary objective of the lesson. So can you separate the means from the context? How many main objectives does this lesson goal have? In read about the stages of butterfly metamorphosis and draw a diagram of the process. And you can just pop your mic on or throw it in the chat.
Well, they have to know every stage of metamorphosis, and then they need to know how to draw the diagram for the process.
Right.
And so there's kind of like 4 or 5 things in one.
Right. Yes. So there's, and the thing that most teachers don't pick up on is reading. Reading the text in and of itself is a goal. Yeah. So are you wanting them to make sure they know how to read? Or do you want them to learn all those things you just said about butterfly metamorphosis? Or do you want them to draw a diagram in a scientific way? So 3 main things with, like you said, so many things embedded in just learning about metamorphosis. right? So we need to separate those, because if it's just reading, then technically they could read about anything. They don't even have to read about butterfly metamorphosis if we just want to work on reading. But if we're not working on reading and we're working on learning about butterfly metamorphosis, then they can learn about that through reading it, through looking up videos of it, through discussions with other peers, through hearing it in a song, so many different ways, finding their own thing online as a way to learn it. So we don't have to limit it to just reading. And then we can focus on just learning the butterfly metamorphosis without having to draw a scientific process as the way to show what they've learned. Because now they can talk about butterfly metamorphosis or rap about it or sing about it or make a Flipgrid video about it or draw about it or create a craft about it to show that they've learned, right? Then we can go into how to draw the scientific process as a separate goal, separate lesson in that. And then they're learning all three of those, which meets the different standards in that.
Well, and reading itself is a huge goal, even for a high school student. We really have to ask ourselves is that our objective? Are we wanting them to be able to work on their reading skill, or are we wanting them to read for comprehension? And if they're reading for comprehension, that's where those tools that we're offering can really come in and help them for their understanding and their connection with the material. If we're working on their actual reading, that's where it gets kind of complex, and you have to think about all those layered skills that go into reading. So we have phonological awareness, we have sight words, we have fluency, we have comprehension, we have all of those areas, and it's also very complex too.
Absolutely. So we want you to just think about the goals or the lesson and what we're asking our students to do, and then really what the overarching ultimate goal is, and then how can we break that down, and then help our students become that expert learner, and then have a voice and a choice in what they're doing and how they're presenting their work.
Yeah, so you can go to the next slide. So if it's the scientific process, then, and that's the main objective, then what pieces of information do they not have that could be a barrier? Do they need to use a template or collaborate with a partner? Or what things can we help them assess that would deepen their understanding of how to diagram a scientific process?
So we have given you a ton of information today. We're almost towards the end. So just some resources we're going to drop again in the chat. We really highly encourage you to visit our website. It gives you our goal. It gives you our mission. It gives you a link to sign up to be on our listserv. So anytime we offer cafes, post webinars, post anything, that's one way to see what's going on in our world. We are on Twitter. We are also on Instagram. I promise Facebook is coming, but life is just happening. But we are on all the social media platforms. So please stay up to date with us. Find the latest and greatest information on our website. So bookmark that, grab it in the chat. Briefly, and we go into more detail on our website too. These are some additional UDL tools and resources that are out there. Co-Writer Universal, Snap and Read Universal, Equatio, and I don't have UPAR up there, but it will be coming. Those are the three that are going to be a part of the New Mexico UDL grant, but please know that those might already be in your district. You might already have them there, so ask around if you're using them. There's also some tools called Kami, Office Lens, Mercury Reader, Math Solver, Microsoft Math Solver, and Read and Write. So those are some of the tools we're also going to highlight during our cafes. And so we meet for our cafes every other Wednesday. Ironically, today is a cafe day. So they're Wednesdays. So the next one after this will be February 23rd. I think if I have that calendar right. They're from 3:15 to 3:15 to 5. Yes, February 23rd, 3:15 to 5. It's a Zoom link. There is no charge for them. we would love for anybody or everybody to join us for our cafes. And then the last thing we have is this initiative. So when your district decides that you want to join and be a part of that initiative, please share that application that we posted. The application is also
We decide.
We also have the application on our website, and I think that is all of it. We are going to leave some time for questioning. We did well this session, team. So we got through a lot. Oh, no, just kidding. We have one more fantastic video to share with you.
Short inspiration.
Short and sweet before we leave you, because this one is a great way to end the day. Oh, just kidding. I clicked the wrong place. Here we go.
If you are trying to leave right now, so just real quick, the survey
My name
is
is
in the
Grover.
chat.
Sean, my name is.
No, go ahead.
The survey is in the chat for anyone that was wanting a certificate. All certificates are sent out on Friday. If you're missing a certificate by Monday, please send me an email with the date of the presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome. So here's the last thing we're going to leave you with.
My name is Grover. Sean, my name is Ian.
I'm Taylor. My name is Owen, and I am 9.5 years old.
I only have one. And yeah.
I love video games, my friends, my family, and again, video games.
Whenever I play it, it makes me feel happy.
The fun that you get to have with connecting with your friends.
You make your own rules?
It's his way of interacting with his friends when he can't physically otherwise do it.
When I'm playing with a regular controller, there's some things that don't work for me.
It's difficult for me to use both joysticks and the D-pad at the exact same time.
And it just slowed me down a bunch more, while other people were like,
she's never had the freedom to play at the level she knows she could.
I never thought it was unfair. I just thought, hey, this is the way it is and it's not going to change.
What I like about the adaptive controller is that now everyone can play.
I don't even have to look at the controller and just be like looking at the screen like, hey, yep.
You never want your kid to feel like an outsider or an other.
One of the biggest fears early on is, how will Owen be viewed by the other kids? He's not different when he plays.
It's a little challenging, but that's the whole point of gaming.
I can hit the buttons just as fast as they can.
And I think I can crush my friends.
No matter how your body is or how fast you are, you can play. It's a really good thing to have in this world.
Now that we all have tears in our eyes. Oh, I can't even talk because that one hit me again. So somebody else.
Yeah, Logan had a question. Were you asking about our cafes?
No, so my one of the administration wants an agenda for the meeting, so to kind of prove we went in a sense. But yeah, no, that was really good. Anyways, on the video.
No, you're good. It's Logan, I know you're going to get a certificate of completion. We don't typically have like an agenda, but we could type something out for you if you'd like.
Well,
I think.
And the copy of the presentation too, maybe it would be good enough to
You
show.
can show him the whole
Okay, yeah.
presentation.
All right, that's perfect. I'll give it to her and be like, here you go.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
so-
tell them the UDL team, New Mexico UDL team wanted you to watch it and tell them what you think.
So on that note, for now that I have it together, to close out today, just remember in everything you're doing, view it with the lens of UDL. We thank you for spending your afternoon with us. We hope we shed some light, gave you some new knowledge. From our New Mexico UDL team, please contact us, reach out to us. We are here. And when we say we are here, we really are. We're not going away. We will answer emails. We will offer more trainings. This webinar will be posted once we get the recordings and kind of piece it all together and clean it up and make sure it's captioned. And then please make sure you take the time, Selena dropped in the chat, to fill out the survey for us. We will be here until just a little bit before 3 because like we said, we have a cafe today. So we will hang on for a little bit to make sure if there's any questions, concerns, if there's anything we can answer for you all. Thank you all again for attending. We appreciate all of you.